Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight's meeting, we are starting out with a quick workshop on the hybrid meeting, and we do have HR and Communications Director Emily Roy and City Attorney Tim Murphy with us this evening to discuss. And councilors, there is 2 memos in your packet from Director Roy and City Solicitor Murphy. Hey, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you all. So in the packet, you'll see a memo from the Communications Department, as well as a memo from City Solicitor Murphy, just walking through the council. If you choose to move forward with hybrid meetings, then the first step would be talking through amendments to the policy to allow you to do so. And in each of these documents, we pointed out some considerations, primary questions that you'd want to ask when making those amendments to make sure that whatever is brought forward best reflects the intentions of offering hybrid or offering in-person or remote meetings, again, in whichever direction the council decides to move. And one of the primary questions that we've grappled with is what to do with the other boards and committees that would be affected by this policy change. So should the council decide to move forward with hybrid meetings, currently the auditorium is set up to be able to do that. However, the other meeting spaces in the city are not. So one option that I included in the memo here would be having the other boards and committees adopt their own policy that would reflect either in-person or remote and have the auditorium be the space where hybrid meetings could occur. However, it would just mean that for those boards, we'd have to work through scheduling to make sure the space was available should they choose to do that, and there may be specific criteria to move in that direction. And then speaking through the criteria, again, as a kind of overview, that's another thing that the council would want to take a look at. If you wanted to expand it beyond the 3 reasons that a meeting can pivot to remote as it currently stands, then you'll just want to talk about how you want to make that determination, what other criteria you want to consider, and then expand to include that. And I'll turn to you, Tim, in case I missed anything.
So just as a kind of a guide that we had when we were looking at your questions, we were mindful that this law falls under Maine's FOA, which is the Freedom of Access Act. And so it's very clear that the Act sets up certain requirements that any policy must meet. You have to have, most importantly, what is called meaningful participation or meaningful opportunity for participation. You need to have the ability of the attending members to cross-participate. So there has to be a free ability to discuss issues between both the remote folks and the in-person folks. And all documents must be reasonably available to the public. So this is not surprising, given the purposes of the FOA are to allow access by the public to government proceedings. So as we looked at the questions and with those ideas in mind, we kind of are somewhat restricted in how we view this. And of course, how you go forward is totally up to you, not to us, but only the council chambers right now fulfill the conditions that the law puts on us. So you're looking at a condition where we've got a lot of other boards and bodies in the city. All of them are equally important. They all serve important governmental ends. And so a policy that allows all of them to be hybrid may be difficult to accomplish simply because of the technology limitations we have, time-space limitations, but Those are hurdles that can be overcome, but it's our job to at least flag them for you and say, it's not something you can just do automatically and say, we want to adopt this policy. Can you? Yes. But there's going to be some issues that you have to grapple with. So towards that end, I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you. So I've been fairly consistent with my desire to see, at the very least, council, and I believe planning board should have, this hybrid meeting format. I guess based on the opinion that we have here, that may be an issue or a conflict with state law. It seems as though if we are to do council that way, all boards or commissions also have to be done that way.
So the statute talks about all bodies within the jurisdiction having to have a policy. Some boards can set up their own policies. That might be different. So council and planning board could be different. The problem you run up against is all policies have to meet the minimum requirements that I referenced earlier, which is meaningful opportunity to participate, access to documents, et cetera. So the state gives and the state also takes away. It says these boards can adopt other policies, but on the other hand, all policies have to have X, Y, and Z. And so we're somewhat hamstrung.
Okay. But most of those boards and commissions to date already meet the statutes of FOIA. So I guess for myself, I think other counselors, the question was, can council roll out this hybrid format where the public is allowed to call in from home and not go down that path of having conservation or Parks and Rec or some of those other smaller committees? Because I think that's the question I've had. Obviously, I don't know if it was made available to you, Attorney Murphy, but Ms. I almost called you Sandvoss. Ms. Brown sent us an email indicating that the state, or her opinion is that the state law may allow us to, as you've stated, they can set their own policies and we can have our own. And I just, as we move forward, I want to make sure that's clear because that would be my goal. And I didn't go to the same depths that Ms. Brown did, but I am aware that some of our surrounding communities do have a policy that allows, again, school board, for example, in Biddeford, you can call in from home.
School boards are exempted out under the statute from what I've seen.
Okay.
There's a special provision pulling them out. But it's a tough sell under the FOA to say that there are some committees that can be managed differently. That's a policy call. If you want to go down that road, I'll defend that. I'll defend that decision.
Okay. Thank you.
So, go ahead, City Administrator Bahanko.
I just think, so Tim, let me just try to put it into perspective. So we do have the ability to have hybrid meetings where you would have the city council, let's say city council and planning, in the auditorium here, and they would have certain parameters which they
Yep.
could follow, with people calling in, et cetera. You also, if I understand correctly, you could have a smaller committee set their own policy, but that could be a full remote.
It would have, the problem with I hate that, I kind of don't like that phrase, lesser committees, but let's just use that. Other committees can set policies, but doing a hybrid policy will be difficult for them because it won't meet these standards.
Right, but they could do
Remote.
which
Yep.
everybody has to do. So, for
Yep.
example, there could be two tiers, if you will. One would be those that are here in the auditorium that can do multiple things because of the
Remote.
technology. Yep, remote. Or two, they could do the hybrid, could do fully remote.
Yeah, we talked about this point this morning, and with Andrew and Emily, I discussed that remote does not present the same technology issues as hybrid.
Right, but I'm just trying to get to Counselor Johnston's question, and I think really, I just wanted to try to simplify it by saying we could have something for here in the auditorium, and then something for others in remote.
Yes, yep.
So I think just to expand on that, when I gave the overview, that would require the council to amend their policy to allow for hybrid, and then the individual boards and committees would then be required to adopt their own policies, which would be in person or remote using our existing technology. So it would be kind of a twofold process. And then if the council wanted to explore other options, then we're happy to solicit proposals or do different research as well.
So again, just to clarify for everybody, so you could really set it up so that remote could only be done here in this particular room.
So hybrid would
Yeah,
be...
I mean, excuse me,
yes.
hybrid in this room, and remote can be done in accordance with the policy for those other committees.
Absolutely. Yep.
Councilors, this is a workshop. You don't need to be addressed as long as you're not over-speaking each other.
I was just going to say, do they have the ability to move back and forth between those options? So if, we'll just say, for example, since I use conservation, maybe it's or they determine it's again, I don't want to use lesser, but an agenda that's not as important per se, and they decide to just meet the traditional way wherever conservation meets now. I'm not certain of that. Is it here? Okay. So, but then there's a topic that they do want to get out, publicly televised with, feedback from the public, and they could then, say we're going to go hybrid. Is that an option where they can move back and forth, or does it have to be strictly one or the other?
So that would be a policy decision as to what criteria you would want to be considered when making that determination, who you'd want to make that decision. So in this policy now, it's the mayor, the deputy mayor, or the chairperson of a board. And then you'd also need to meet all the noticing requirements to make sure that people are aware as to how they can participate in the meeting. So those are all just considerations you'd want to make.
So if I may, Counselor, one caveat. The role then requires a staff person that is the assistant to a particular committee judging what's an important matter, your words, versus an unimportant matter. Citizens have widely varying views to them as to what's important and not important, and so they might not appreciate a meeting being backburnered in the old... It's just one risk to keep in mind. But you could set a policy, if this room is available, then hybrid is available for any committee.
Well, that's the only concern I have is, we're going to have a lot of scheduling conflicts, I would, again, guess, because oftentimes, there's been instances where I've had a meeting that was scheduled to be up here and somebody else also had a meeting scheduled. So we already have, to some degree, that potential. So again, I recognize, well, I don't know, I have a question for you. Does it have to be a staff member, or could it be a properly trained chairperson or volunteer? Because years ago, it was a volunteer that flipped the switch for CTV 30 or whatever the channel was for council meetings. So I guess there's that question. And then I guess, I don't know, I'm obviously I think that we collectively probably should make some considerations to other locations that might make sense, whether it's the DPW training room they have or others.
If Andrew could just speak to some of the technology changes that have occurred. So we don't have any volunteers that are assisting with the cablecast now because it's a much more advanced system than we had previously. But I'll let Andrew talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So just to clarify a little bit about the equipment in the control room here behind the stage, and especially the hybrid equipment that we've yet to implement but was installed in spring of 2023. It's not quite as simple as flipping a switch, so we wouldn't be having chairs or volunteers or even staff liaisons managing these meetings. It's involved enough that you would need a staff person as it is now, run by the communications department. So if you're talking about, to step back a few questions, shifting a meeting from a board like the Conservation Commission into this room for a hybrid meeting, that would require additional staff time as well. Our staff does not, we do occasionally, but we don't attend every Conservation Commission meeting or every board and committee like we did during COVID. But that would just be, hours being added to and a different area of work, which is a consideration to make. And managing these hybrid meetings, as the state law mentions, like Tim and Emily and John have spoken about, comes with the heavy weight of making sure that they are truly accessible to all users and between all users. So it's not something that you want to just flip a switch, step out of the room, and hope works perfectly the whole time. You're talking about connecting up to, as we see now, I think 10 microphones into a system that goes through and comes out clearly to everyone participating from their computer, phone, tablet, telephone. And then on the same time, bringing back people's audio and or video onto the TVs in the room and through the sound system in the room, as well as through your tabletop monitors and back to other people on their hybrid platforms. So it's a pretty complicated web of technology that we would want to make sure is directly managed for every hybrid meeting that might occur.
So, go ahead, you.
I appreciate that. That actually goes into what I was going to ask you, Andrew, though, because we had a situation, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, when HPC, which has been using this room, just met in their usual old place down in the conference room, and I think you had to rig up all the recording equipment and everything. And I made the comment to people there, though, and they made the comment to me that, committees like that, not a lesser committee, but let's just call them a little bit more informal in the sense that they engender more free-flowing communication among, for lack of a better term, unelected people that tend to speak like normal people, as opposed to when you kind of get behind this and this feels a little formal and stuff. And basically, they love the idea of being back in that room because even though there was work involved, you could still have the screen up and people could watch it from home. So I guess my logical question was, because you just touched on this, if we were to set aside, say, aside from the chambers, the downstairs conference room or that really great conference room they have over at the Public Works, for the hybrid meetings, you'd have at least 2 places that you could have the meetings, occurring concurrently. So if there was any scheduling conflicts, obviously there's time involved and that sort of thing. But I guess my question is, aside from the time, aside from the money, is it physically possible if we were to say the hell with it and just go with a full hybrid meeting process, so we wouldn't have these multiple layers, I guess? So.
Sure. So to clarify for everyone in the room, HPC had a meeting down there. They've begun doing video recordings in the last few months.
Yeah.
So we use technology that exists in that room to do a video recording of an fully in-person meeting. Is it possible? Is it physically possible? We can make just about anything work. So the answer is yes, it is physically possible.
Well,
there are constraints to consider with certain rooms, depending on their allocation through the year. So the first floor conference room in particular is used for absentee voting when it begins. So it'll begin again here in October, and we also had an election in June, and we had an election earlier in the year as well, a primary. So there were about a total of 5 or 6 months throughout this year that room wasn't available. Yeah. So it's not a room I would recommend equipping with this technology. There are other rooms in the city, meeting spaces that you could consider, and the technological investment to meet that standard of everyone being able to communicate clearly with each other from all ends is something that you could invest funds in. And if you'd like us to come back with proposals for that type of work throughout the city, it's something that we can work with the administrator on.
To that point, though, because the DW, the Public Works room is so relatively new, I mean, that would definitely, I think, be my next logical choice as a centrally located meeting place to use, perhaps in lieu of the conference room, which, to your point, is not necessarily available during election season and whatnot. I think would be very practical. And like I said, it makes for a better functioning meeting, though, because you can't throw everybody in this room and have the meetings work, especially when there's, say, in the case of HPC, where there's applicants or there's people presenting evidence, and sometimes there's, passing it around and they want to, stand in the middle. Having it spread out like this is not practical. So the idea of having that possible for a smaller meeting place, I think is something we should really look at, though, because I think throwing every committee potentially in this room because of hybrid, it's not going to engender the best type of functioning committees I think we're used to seeing. And that's just my 2 cents on that issue.
Why are we applying this generally across all boards? I know the opinion we received stated that the policy adopted must apply to all boards and bodies within the jurisdiction. However, if you look at the law, Section B of 2B allows for a remote participation policy adopted pursuant to 403B, and then keep going a little bit more, unless the county commissioners, municipal officers, which is us, or other officers of regional or other political subdivision, specifically authorize a public body under the jurisdiction to adopt its own remote participation policy. So why can't we as a council specifically authorize which boards have the most impact, in which we put those resources to those boards that we best see fit? Have all hybrid meetings here. I would say for consistency that whatever boards are chosen, that's the standard. And then you create certain sections here to allow for that law of everybody has meaningful impact. First of all, if you come to our meeting, it's not you have access to public comment. You can have public comment on site, and after that, Section B, public comment online. Still get a couple minutes, we decide. I don't think it's as hard as we think. I don't know where the must apply to all boards and commissions come from, because the law clearly states that our body has allowed, specifically authorized a public body. So we can say, planning board, yes, Parks and Rec, no, traffic safety, no. We could make those decisions, and to help, we standardize, and they just happen here, and we specifically specify which ones allow. And I would say it's based on the most impact, traditionally, which boards have the most impact and which public participation is. So we do have some that will always be small office, small room, things like that, and then we have our planning, our council, we all just keep a standard of hybrid in which there are sections that address those who are online, build it right into our agenda. I don't think this is as hard as we're making it. We do not need to separate. The law specifically, I know this opinion states must apply to all boards, which either I could use additional clarification or a second opinion on that, but the law is kind of just on its face telling me we can make that rule and apply which boards, and it doesn't have to apply to all boards.
I would say that'd be the most practical way of doing it, because to go back to the HPC example, we have members of the public going to the commission asking for permission to do something to their home in the historic preservation district. Now, I'm of the opinion that if you have that much concern about your neighbor putting on some type of shutter, you can show up, though. But at the end of the day, it's not for general public comment, though. You're going to a commission about your private property, and it doesn't, I don't think, engender the same sort of public participation that I understand why people insisted upon for public comment for things like the planning board and certainly school board and the council. And to that end, I don't think you need to have a full hybrid in that case, but I would leave that up to the HPC or any other similar commission, because again, everything's recorded, everything's out there, so it's not like the level of transparency is certainly much higher than it ever used to be, those.
Well, recording and having it available to the public is different than hybrid. Hybrid must have that interaction aspect.
Yeah.
So we can publish all meetings.
Yeah.
That I'm not afraid to. But where is the interaction?
Yes.
And that's when we say hybrid or not.
So I agree with Councilor Archer, and I think they made that point earlier too, is that individual commissions and committees can set their own policy. My preference would be to see us come out of this meeting with a consensus that City Council, Planning Board, and School Board, if they so choose, should adopt a hybrid meeting policy, and all meetings should be hybrid for those commissions. Our other boards and commissions can then set their own policy, which should largely, I think, be restricted from hybrid, except under special cases, simply due to staff and technology considerations. Those meetings can still be recorded and published, but they should either be fully remote or fully in person, the criteria of which could be decided as we move forward. Could be the chair of the committee or commission and or mayor could weigh in as to when those committees should go remote.
But Section 8, it says the committee, board can do it, but Section B says we decide which ones. They wouldn't decide.
Yeah.
We would say you have the right to make a policy, or you don't have a right to make a policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the hybrid meeting policy should be limited to council, planning board, and school board, if they so choose. I guess that they're authorized to do something different than what we set. And I think I think we said those boards and commissions for hybrid meetings, it maximizes staff time, it maximizes utility of this room. We don't run into these scheduling conflicts. If there's a need for a committee to go fully remote, we can do that by Zoom or Teams technology that's widely accessible and available to people, and we've already learned how to do that through the pandemic, making, I think, that easy. I think allowing all boards and commissions to go hybrid is simply going to be a nightmare of scheduling and staff time and training, and to figure out, I don't think we should allow that. In terms of the second question about participation, I think we should greatly favor council and board members being present when possible. I think we should expand that to allow the mayor's discretion to allow a particular board or commission member to participate by hybrid under exceptional circumstances. I think all of us sometimes have conflicts. I had 2 last month, and I would have preferred to be able to, I wouldn't have had to miss a meeting if I could have dialed in, and that would be preferable. Shouldn't exempt a residency requirement, shouldn't exempt councilors from being here and board members from being here whenever possible and feasible, but in rare exceptions, I think the mayor should be able to authorize somebody to dial in and participate in the meeting that way.
To your point, though, yes, that the mayor would still have discretion, though. So if we ever have a future council or school board member who wants to chime into meetings from Brazil, though, you can say as the mayor, no, you're going to come home and be in the meeting, though. So we don't know, there's no future bad actors, so to speak. You know?
And to that point, it would be myself and the city administrator if it was a weather emergency, let's say. If we were to have a snowstorm, and instead of canceling the meeting, we have the appropriate amount of time to call the hybrid meeting, to go fully remote for everybody.
I'd like to chime in if I could here. I'm in agreement with full hybrid for council and planning board, and accepting out the other boards and commissions. However, I would like us to provide a provision for the other boards and commissions in that rare situation where they may feel they need to engage a hybrid meeting, that we have some sort of protocol for that. And I would think somebody would need to authorize that. I'm not sure who.
If you're remote and hybrid, how do you determine what's an emergency? Because if it's an emergency, you shouldn't be meeting hybrid.
No,
So I guess we're connecting hybrid and we're connecting remote. Those are two separate.
right, but I'm thinking of a hybrid meeting for a topic that is of broad general interest at
I would
any-
use the term special meeting maybe instead,
Okay.
calling a special meeting,
Yeah,
if you had an item that was fully city-related.
right.
Or had some impact
That's my
to a
point.
larger
Just
group.
a little provision there that allows some flexibility. But I do like the limitation to council and planning board. I would worry a little bit about funding for, across the board hybrid meetings for everybody. I wanted to also address I think what Councilor Berman was driving at, and I agree with him, that if a provision that would allow us to, as council, to attend a meeting and participate and vote remotely or in that hybrid situation would be, I think, a good thing. However, I do want to address, I think, Attorney Murphy. There we go. Geez, Tim, I've known you for 100 years and I just forgot your name. Attorney Murphy mentioned about the residency issues. And I think that, maybe the way to deal with that is to just limit the number of meetings that a counselor in any given year could attend remotely. And then we can manage our own time and work with the mayor to, and I don't know what that magic number is. 2 sounds like a good number to me, but I don't know, maybe 2, 3, something like that. So those are a couple of observations from my perspective. And Tim, I'm going to write your name down so I never forget it again.
Councilor Hash, as a follow-up to that, in terms of your procedure, for practical purposes, I could foresee one where the chair of the board basically informs city staff that this meeting should be a hybrid, so therefore they do not have to come to the council for formal permission, nor do we have to basically sit and set a list of all the committees and say, A, B, and C, they're going to meet this, so to make it much more practical and much more, so they still have the agency over their own. I mean, that sounds about as, so we don't have to get in the weeds on that. That sounds about a practical way of approaching that.
Counselor, keep in mind that right now, this is the only facility, this room, that has the ability, according to staff, to manage hybrid.
Yeah.
So,
That's why I said, that's why the chair could, can talk to staff about it, and the staff can say, well, either that's practical, or maybe you should move that agenda to another time. That's why I didn't say come to the council.
I have a question for the attorney. If we did allow some of the committees to meet fully remote, would we be eliminating access for individuals who do not have the access to technology or computers or the skills or familiarity with it? And do we risk any legal from that?
so the legislature has allowed the adoption of remote,
Okay.
100% remote. So that's a legislative decision that's been made and accepted. Will it potentially adversely affect some people who either don't have broadband access, don't have access to computers, or don't know how to use them? Yes, I would agree with that. But
But if it's hybrid and we allow for them to be in person, we've given them an option. It's not the best option, but we are providing the legal minimum option.
yeah, I think it was viewed as it was so risky for us to meet collectively because none of us knew the extent of the risk posed by COVID, that on the balance of harms, it was believed that the minimal intrusion of public participation was outweighed by the health savings. And so we accepted it under those terms. Are there costs? Sure. But this body has always wanted or expressed a preference to meet in person because of the benefits that come from that as well. The question is, as raised tonight, can we gain some additional benefits if we allow for hybrid?
Okay. Thank you.
I hope I addressed that question.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't need to belabor this. I think everybody's spoken, and I certainly led with my desire being council and planning board, so I hope that gives staff some direction as this goes forward. To Councilor Berman's point about having that option of being away and still meeting, I am supportive of that. I do think we have enough already in existing, whether it's our policies and procedures that would be able to regulate that. Obviously, if a counselor has three meetings in a row and it's because they're on vacation, well, I think at some point we probably should, be able to determine whether or not that's proper. I mean, and that's what I do respect Attorney Murphy's opinion about the residency issue. I think that we're able to say, okay, well, you've been in Florida for 5 months, right? So I would hope that, certainly counselors and the mayor and whatnot are paying attention to that. So I am supportive of that. I know that he's, in particular, has missed several meetings due to work-related, which, is unfortunate. Thank you.
And again, I'm in agreement with that. I personally would like to just see council, planning board. We can approach the school board with it and ask, but as Attorney Murphy stated, they are exempt if they don't wish to participate. But my question is security on the aspect of allowing the residents to view and comment. There have been other communities that, even though they have security, things that, like a verification process almost. I know Biddeford, at one point, they actually had to pre-verify residents before they were allowed into the hybrid session.
So to speak on that, we are aware of one of the larger communities in Maine. They do have a policy that allows the council to meet in all three methods, so in-person, remote, and hybrid. They were holding all of their meetings in a hybrid capacity until they had recurring inappropriate participation, from what I understand it, so they ended up returning to in-person or remote for the time period. In terms of the security, so one thing that we did with remote meetings would be that we didn't allow the remote participants to share their screen or participate in a way that had their camera be visible. So it was similar to somebody calling in or just having the voice participate in order to help with one layer of that. There is always risk of somebody joining the meeting and using profanity or, holding that platform to communicate something that you may not want to continue. So that's where it would be really important for the mayor, the chair, to manage the meeting just like an in-person meeting, and would need to have a protocol as to how to terminate that participation should they violate a code of conduct or those expectations. So that would be one of the responsibilities of the chair. So you recognize somebody who's speaking, and then if that violates, the rules of participation, then you'd have to end that. Andrew, do you want to expand on that a little bit with security?
So I think one thing you have to balance here when you're allowing hybrid participation is that it is much easier for people to do things that they would not come to a podium in a city hall chambers and do. At the same time, you need to balance people's right to free expression and free speech. So it will be something that chairs and the mayor will have to be very mindful of throughout meetings. But there can be instruction and training on the fastest way with either a keyboard shortcut or 2 clicks of a mouse to remove someone's speaking permissions. There is no way that I've heard of that you can fully verify that a person on the internet joining a remote meeting is who they say they are. So we can look into and present options for that, but it is something to keep in mind. And as Emily said, some municipalities that did do hybrid meetings week after week after week for several years made the decision after several incidents to only do hybrid in special circumstances like you were discussing, where there may be an issue of larger interest from the community.
During the pandemic, I took part in some Zoom workshop-style meetings in which panelists are allowed free access. Their camera and microphone work all the time. But for members of the public, their camera and microphone are unlocked only when specifically recognized, and then return to being in a locked state when they're not being recognized. And I think that minimizes the likelihood of disruption and maximizes the ability to control for inappropriate speech. You would only unlock the person who's being recognized during a public comment period, and then relock screens and microphones afterwards. I think if we have that technology available, that might assist with some of that.
If I could just quickly add some detail to that, it is a practice that we had in place during COVID through the fully remote meetings. It is a practice that every municipality in Maine that I've seen that does hybrid meetings employs, and one that we would employ as well. That being said, every municipality in Maine has employed this method, and it's still happened over and over. So you can put up gates and try to stop bad actors from coming in and delivering, say, hate speech, but you're reliant a bit on their ability to be truthful from the get-go.
I would say that I think I like Councilor Berman's idea because, again, in a community our size, there is the expectation if you call in and you claim that you're, Frank Jones, and everyone's like, hey, that ain't Frank Jones, they're probably going to want to leave, though. But if that person decides also, to your point, to take advantage of being at home and feel compelled to spew profanities, then by that nature, if they are approaching their free speech that way, then the mayor in her capacity as the chair can approach her ability to preside over the meeting in a way that's a little bit more, shall we say, harder than it would be in public, though. And I think if you're going to have the balance of people communicating from home, then they're going to have to live with the fact that the mayor will cut you off if you're going to try to cause some problems. And I don't think that is a major infringement of people's participation because they can show up in public and behave themselves if they want to. And we're not going to let ourselves be subject to bad actors, and that's how I feel about that.
And that's as far as the process, doing that aspect of it, is that something that I would have control over, or staff member running the meeting would have control, or both? That's in the hybrid as well?
Correct.
Okay, so like even the planning board chair either that chairperson or somebody that they designated would have the control to manage the meeting.
So similar to in-person, calling on somebody for public comment or recognizing a member of the public to speak, that would be mirrored in the virtual participation.
And just to add on to that, we do have staff in the control room who would be managing the meeting. It's not their place necessarily to direct, as Emily said, who speaks when and how long. But should you have a failure with your technology to cut someone off, you could verbally direct the staff person in the back to assist you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so what are we looking for tonight? Yep.
If I might, Your Honor. Is it something that you'd want, what we heard tonight, would you want us to try to put something together for the council and bring it back and then let the council, it would be more of in a presentation matter? It would be more presentation so that we'd have it'd be like an ordinance type of thing where you'd be able to tell us you like it, you don't like it, that type of thing. I think we've heard enough to understand what the city council is getting at, and we could give it a shot.
Bring back it as a new business item.
We could adopt a policy in one meeting, right?
Yeah, if you want to, but I mean, I don't know if you want to be, I mean, it's up to you, but, you know, it's something we could do in one meeting, or we could bring it to you, and if you want to think about what's before you, that's fine too. Yeah.
Bring it back as a plan, as new business, and then based on the comments from that plan of action, what we would like to see forward, and then a first reading.
Sounds great.
We will
Okay.
give that a shot. Okay?
Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so we will now call the official meeting to order at 7:12. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for August 26, 2024. I'd like to make note that all members of the council are present, including City Administrator Bahenko. And would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Okay, that now takes us to item number 4, and that is committee correspondence to council. Is there any committee correspondence? Okay, not seeing anyone seeking recognition. Moving on to item 5, that is general, and there is no general this evening. Item 6 is public comment. And we do have 3 members of the public signed up to speak first. That is, first we have Rob Biggs. Please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to address council.
Okay, my name is Rob Biggs. I live at 334 Lincoln Street. Mayor McPhail, city council members, city administrator, Bohanko, I want to start by saying that I'm very sensitive to the plight of the unhoused, and it's a very complex issue that we have to deal with. With that said, I currently reside in a 10-unit townhouse development on Lincoln Street, backing up to the undeveloped section of Diamond Riverside Park. As a point of reference, in this 10-unit development, 4 are occupied by single women. Since we have lived there the last 2 summers, we've had significant occupation by the unhoused camping along the river in the undeveloped part of the Diamond Riverside Park, west of the train tracks. With that amount of human interaction and activity comes an amazing amount of trash, human waste, and cutting of trees larger than 6 inches in diameter. To Parks and Rec credit, last January, they cleared 70-plus 50-gallon bags of trash and encampment debris out of the park. For that, I'd like to thank Director Summers and his team. I'm here to tell you that during the summer, when we have our windows open, there are regular events where we hear loud yelling, threats of wanting to kill someone, an amazing amount of 4-letter words, screaming things like, I'm going to F you up, and I'm going to F and cut you up, and I'm going to kill you. loud arguments all hours of the night and early into the morning. Last summer, on 2 occasions, we had small caliber gunshots fired after midnight. I can tell you that with all of this, it's very disconcerting for the individuals in our complex, including the single women, as well as my 21-year-old daughter and her friends sitting on our back deck. I can sincerely tell you that as a 10 to 12-year-old boy living in Saco, I would be in this park all day in my summers fishing, looking for frogs, salamanders, and enjoying the open space, much like Nathan Johnson did when he was young. At this point, if I were a parent, I'd be highly concerned about my children entering this part of the park. While walking my dog today on the playground side or the developed side of Diamond Riverside Park, at the far end of the park, looking towards the train trestle, I saw a ladder, a grocery cart full of camping equipment and clothing, several suitcases, pots and pans, broken glass, bicycle parts, etc. I've sent all of you photos by text if I had your cell number, and Councilor Hewitt and Parks, I sent it by email to you. In closing, I want to thank you, City Council, our police, Parks and Rec, Public Works departments for addressing the issue and doing certainly a yeoman's effort. I'm in full support of creating the ordinance as outlined in your meeting minutes, and thank you for your time. 1 second to go.
Thank you, Rod. Okay, next on the list this evening, we do have Bethany Benton. Bethany, if you'd come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Bethany Benton. I too live at 334 Lincoln Street, number 2. I moved to Saco about a year and a half ago, and I have 3 small dogs that I take to the park pretty much daily down at Diamond. And this summer has been very upsetting just to see the amount of trash that's being, disposed of along the area and the river. Also, just seeing the traffic, the foot traffic that comes in from the front of the park, goes back to the back and crosses the tracks. I've heard numerous arguments, things that children shouldn't have to hear or see from people coming out of that area. I also, about a month ago, walked in there on a Saturday morning, and there was a camp set up pretty much directly across from the playground equipment. So I have talked to a volunteer, and I think it's great. The city has done an excellent job with having volunteer groups out there to keep things clean and keep the trash picked up. But I did talk to a gentleman that goes almost daily just to see about like broken glass and if there are needles. My dogs sometimes run free with a leash, but a long leash, and I do worry not only about their safety, but the children too that are playing in that park, especially around the river and the water. You go see frogs, you go look at nature, and you could, be exposed to something. So I appreciate you guys' efforts in trying to clean this up. I enjoy the park, and I really do hope that we can keep it clean and safe. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up this evening, we have Ron Mishu.
Hi, Ron Michaud, Bayview Road. I'm actually here for a public hearing. You can tell I'm out of touch here. I haven't done this in years, but I'll wait for the public hearing if that's okay.
Thank you. If there is any other members of the public wishing to speak, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Chelsea Hill, 108 Bradley Street. I'm here to speak on the open meetings workshop that was discussed earlier tonight. I reviewed the legal memo provided in tonight's workshop packet, and I attempted to review, this is important, 1, Maine Revised Statute, section 403, space 2-A, parentheses A, which is how it's listed in the memo, where the review states that this is the section that says state law requires every commission and board to have exactly the same access as council for hybrid meetings. And this could be on me, and maybe I'm wrong, but To me, this section does not appear to exist within the statute. I did find section 403, subsection 2, subparagraph A, which states that a record of each public proceeding for which notice is required under section 406 must be made within a reasonable period of time. And then subsection A just specifies that the date, time, and place of the public proceeding must be published, but it doesn't mention hybrid meetings or technological requirements. I did find section 403-A in the main revised statutes online, but it shows as repealed by the state. It appears to have covered meeting access during the pandemic emergency. So the citation in the legal memo might be wrong, but I'm not finding this specific MRS statute, or the 403 space 2-A, paren A. Section 403B seems to talk about remote participation and again does not cover anything like this really as described in the legal memo. It discusses how individual committees seem to be able to self-govern. The point of me bringing this up is that I think more investigation is needed into the basis for the legal memo that was presented in the workshop with the disclaimer that I am not a lawyer and slightly literate. We also heard during the workshop that hybrid does not equal remote, and so I think it's just really important that we get some clarification around which statute is the basis for the legal memo. The point of my remarks tonight is that I work approximately 50 hours a week at my regular job, which generally offers a high level of flexibility. I have an incredibly chill 9-year-old child who's currently in a chair in the lobby, who should be in bed each night by 8 p.m. and goes to school or Parks and Recs or Excel or a friend's house each day or doesn't, depending on the school schedule. I'm also a full-time grad student in Portland with a husband who also works upwards of 60 hours per week at his relatively inflexible job, who's also a full-time graduate student in Portland. We are both on city committees and we both have active social lives and try to be as involved as we possibly can because we believe strongly that we have a responsibility to our communities to get involved and be advocates while also being good employees and great parents. I have been bored in a hotel room in Connecticut while BPAC meets here for work, and I could have joined, but I was told that we can't do that. I have heard on more than one occasion city councilors, board members, committee members, former mayors, and other people who are active in the city business lament that no one gets involved, no one cares about what goes on in town, all people do is complain after decisions are made, and I'm sure that somewhere there are people like this, but I also feel that there's a huge gap in understanding for what it takes to be able to be involved. There's an immense amount of privilege in having a salaried job with no hard hours and a super chill kid, reliable transportation, and somehow the energy to live our lives and still prioritize what we prioritize. Not offering hybrid meetings is incongruent with your stated desire to have engaged and active citizens in the city, and I would, if given more time, argue that not having a hybrid option for both people who have signed up to serve their city and also the public is a discriminatory decision because we have the technology and the funding sources to make this work so that more people can be involved in their local government. Think of people who are unable to leave their homes, people without childcare, people without transportation, but who want to be involved and participate but can't because they are excluded from the available environment.
Chelsea, just to let you know, we are at a minute over.
Sorry. I have 4 lines left. Okay. This is despite the we talk about isolation of older adults, and we talk about how people endlessly complain, yet never get involved, and yet here we are wondering why. Well, this is despite the technological capacity. If we don't find a way to make hybrid participation a reality, we are essentially saying that we're not building that digital ramp or digital elevator to get everyone into the building. Please make the right choice on this issue and support a hybrid option for public participation, and please have a second set of eyes on the legal opinion that you reviewed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Good evening. My name is Nick Adams. I live at 19 Mechanic Street. I was watching your last meeting, and I thought it was a great start that you all talked about Vision Zero. But this is something that I think, and as I look at it, I worry that this is one of those things that could be all talk and not a whole lot of action or change. Last year, 2 people were killed when they were hit by cars on streets here in Saco, one of which was actually in a crosswalk where there are stop signs. It's an all-way stop and has a blinking red light. And the district attorney determined that the person who killed this person was not acting negligently when they went through the stop sign. So so they are not going to press any charges. So if it's not illegal to kill people with your car, I would just ask that the city do its best to try and keep us all safe. I've brought this up at traffic safety. One of the things that the city is severely lacking on is our crosswalk safety. Some of it is just down to people driving too fast, but some of it is, I guess I would call it negligence. If you want to know what a bad crosswalk situation looks like, and you want to see maybe an example of crosswalks that currently don't have signs at all, like no crosswalk signs, look out that window over there. Look out that window over there, because you can see it right in front of our in front of our city hall. I think that's a little embarrassing, really, that we, we're talking about safety, but we haven't even bothered to do the bare minimum to try and keep people safe. And I think this is something that we should take seriously. But I also want to encourage all of you to maybe try and learn more about some of the struggles. And a great way to do that, hearing about the struggles with safety, is the Traffic Safety Committee, which will be meeting next month on the 19th. I want to encourage all of you, if you can make it, to try and attend. I know several of you have, and I appreciate that. I think what you are all doing is a good start by looking at Vision Zero. But I want to encourage you to really take that up and think about what kind of community are we if we say that we have all the funds, all the time, all the energy, and all the attention to get people from one place to another as fast as possible in their cars, but we don't care if you're on your feet and walking around downtown, patronizing our awesome businesses and walking to parks. So please, I would just ask all of you to take this seriously. Think about the safety of every pedestrian, every person, people who maybe can't take a car, people who rely on a wheelchair. Imagine what it's like for them. People who are taking their child out to somewhere and they have to park somewhere and then walk to get to it on Main Street. That's many times the case. Just recently, just about a week ago, I watched somebody pushing a stroller almost get hit on crossing in front of the post office. And that's scary to me to think that this is happening. And so I just ask you to help us by doing something. Take the Vision Zero and really take action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else?
Hi, good evening. I'm Inga Brown, 161 Simpson Road. Thank you for this initial workshop on hybrid meetings. I appreciate it very much. I think I'm with Councilor Archer that I wasn't picturing this being as complicated as perhaps it has maybe. I also, to Councilor Hewitt's point, I certainly, for my own view, wasn't picturing fully remote meetings. I was picturing that our boards, our commissions, our committees are always meeting in municipal spaces, that citizens can always come in person and participate or listen in a meeting. I guess I don't understand really, and I need some training, really the difficulty between why remote is perhaps easier to do than hybrid. As Councilor Berman is an educator through COVID, we all learned how to pivot very quickly, and teachers hosted hybrid classes. We had students at home on Zoom. I was the host of the meeting. I was teaching at the same time. I was managing people's participation. We used owls, which are microphones and cameras that swivel to pick up people's voices. And so to me, a hybrid model is extremely supportive of very meaningful participation, whether someone is at home or in the room. So I look forward to more conversation and really the nitty-gritty of how that works. I do know that obviously communities have had issues with troublemakers, but we say our name and our address, and people need to do that as well online. I know they can lie. I know they can quickly devolve into something else, but that can be shut down very quickly. So I really appreciate the energy
and in talking to our other surrounding communities that have been doing hybrid meetings for a long time now, this community needs this and wants this. When I entered the auditorium this evening, I heard someone say offhandedly, "Oh, the same old people are here." And there are so many people who want to participate, caregivers, parents, people who are multitasking at home. You speak to them, I speak to them. They want to be engaged, and I know we can figure this out. So thank you.
Thank you.
My first time, Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street, and I'm bringing an exhibit. City Administrator Bohinka, I personally want to thank you for hiring Dan Murphy of Bernstein and Schur in a Zoom hearing or in court filings. In my opinion, he is a skillful litigator. He was rigorous in his analysis, and he was steadfast in his commitment to developing airtight strategy for the city of Saco. His responsiveness was exceptional to what I have personally witnessed before. And with my critical eye of these court documents, he did not miss a step. Thank you, Mr. Bohenko. And please convey from myself and hundreds upon hundreds of Saco stakeholders our gratitude for his representation to the city of Saco in regards to the 321 Lincoln Street appeal and its ultimate denial. As this appeal is no longer pending, I am formally requesting that this administration, this council, to now bring forth the pending citizen grievance per charter, the 4-4 investigation by City Council per Charter 9.04 and 9.05 Code of Ethics concerning June 20th, 2023's City Attorney's action. We would not have needed Mr. Dan Murphy if local laws were followed that day. Taxpayers would not have had to pay Bernstein and Schur. Reputations of appointees would not have been harmed or disposed through interrogatory in court proceedings. In my opinion, a planning board appointee was bullied on June 20th and then again by Mr. Graver to the point of resignation. We wouldn't have had full-page ads, hundreds of employees receiving multiple emails, officials being a recipient of libel-like action. This has become a common theme, taxpayers paying for the appeals due to attorney errors. How much did this one cost us? Mr. Dollums, Acapello and Church, Toddle Inn, among a few. I absolutely agree with Jane Karen and Inga Brown's letters to the council and Chelsea's and Inga's public comment. Still, I am highly concerned with packets not having full disclosure of information for your informed decision. This night regarded exceptions of the main statute. Also, after hearing the workshop, I believe any quasi-judicial board is not, in quote, a lesser board and should be a hybrid, not just the council or the planning board, HPC. They are making judgments and voting on what is abutters needs their right to know. And they need the full participation in order to know what's going on. So out of the 30 boards, 30 plus boards and ad hocs, how many are truly quasi-judicial that should be elevated to a hybrid? Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing anyone seeking recognition. We now move on to item 7, and as the approval of the minutes, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Motion made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Parks. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to approve the minutes passes 7-0. Okay, that moves us now to item 8, and that is the consent items. Item A is an application for a solid waste permit with Waste Management of Maine. Item B is the application for a solid waste permit with Casella Waste. Item C is to confirm the mayor's reappointment to the Arts Commission of Laura Bradsetter. Item D is the acceptance of the fiscal year 2024 annual report. Item E is to confirm the mayor's promotions from associate member to regular members on the Conservation Commission of Curtis Scammon, Paul Christian, and Madeline Clark. And item F is to confirm the mayor's appointment to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee of Melissa Shannon and Nick Adams. Is there a motion to approve the consent items? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, can I pull out item D, acceptance of the 2024 annual report?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, there has been request to move item D, which will now become action item A. Is there a motion to approve the minutes based on the item moving?
So moved.
Motion made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any other discussion on any of the consent items? Councilor Johnston?
Just a quick comment. While I certainly support all those that have volunteered their times for these appointments, I did just want to recognize Mr. Adams. His short period of time here, about a year or so, I believe, I've seen him participate as a citizen at just about all my traffic safety committee meetings. I'm sure he's probably been at several others, and it's been very appreciative, at least on my part, and I look forward to him being, an impactful member of BPAC. So I think it's a great addition. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to approve the consent items as changed passes 7-0. Okay, that now takes us to item 9, and that is the action items. And again, consent item D is now action item A, and that is the acceptance of the fiscal year 2024 annual report. And that is
Me.
Councilor Archer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. According to MRSA Title 30A, subsection 2801, municipalities are required to publish an annual report that includes financial records, assets, and liability statements, and a post-audit report for the fiscal year 2024. Each department has also provided a summary of their operations. Once approved by the City Council, the report will be available on the city's website with a printed copy accessible at the city clerk's office. We'd like to acknowledge Andrew Dickinson, Michelle Beasley, and Jerry Mathurin, Judy Belanger, Christy Sear, for their assistance with prepping the annual report this year. Be it resolved that the City Council accepts the fiscal year 2024 annual report as submitted by the City Administrator. I move to approve the resolution.
Motion has been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? I'm sorry, roll call vote. Councilor, is there any discussion? Sorry. Lost my train of thought there for a second. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a great report. I really appreciate the detail through all the departments. I thought it was really well put together, so thank everybody for that. The reason I wanted it pulled out is because what caught my attention was some of the overdue taxes at the end. And I'm wondering if either tonight or at some point in the future, council can be educated about some of the efforts to collect some of these unpaid taxes. For example, I found one, the ROTM Lofts LLC, that appears every year with amounts ranging from $30,000 to $50,000 for all 4 years listed. And to see some of the same names year after year after year not paying their taxes led me to wonder about collection efforts and what we can do about chronically overdue taxes. So I just wanted to raise that as a point of inquiry. either for tonight or at some points in the future.
Your Honor, I certainly will bring back a report on that. I believe that over time, we do collect probably 99%, but I will bring back a report to deal with those that are listed in the annual report.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. I was, same train of thought, actually. I was going to save that for the council comments. But yeah, along that same line, specific to the run-of-the-mills lofts, they have liens going back to 2020. I have some familiarity with that particular development. It dates back to 2019 or so when they were, let's see, supposed to have set up an escrow fund of about $60,000 to repair the mezzanine before they were issued occupancy permits. So that's actually something that's been on one of my lists, my many lists, to find out if that ever happened, because I recently walked that mezzanine and found it. I mean, the city has a right-of-way over it. It's a tripping liability. It's hazardous, if you ask me.
Counselor, I'm meeting with them next week.
Okay, so yes, that's
on that specific issue.
If we can have, again, probably best suited for executive session, a report on that, because I think they're up to $250,000 or so in back taxes.
Okay, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
And Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Okay, there has been a request to move item C, which is now item D, public hearing of the Community Development Block Grant Economic Development Program, to the next item. Is there any objection from council? Okay, so item C is now item B. And with that, Councilor Johnston.
Yeah, we got tech issues over here.
Page 41.
Yeah, it's the new system. Thank you. Oh, I got old man eyes now. How do I get it? Can you just roll it up a little bit? See, again, good old-fashioned paper.
Yep.
That's where I'm at in life. The Economic Development Department submitted a letter of intent for a CDBG Economic Development Program grant on behalf of Tan Bark Molded Fiber Products. Tan Bark Molded Fiber Products are located at 34 Spring Hill Road, are planning to purchase new equipment for the purpose of creating an additional 20 full-time jobs. The city was successful with the letter of intent and has been invited to submit a complete grant application in the amount of $100,000 as part of the next phase of the project. As part of the grant application, the city is required to hold a public hearing. The Economic Development Department will act as the grant administrator and will oversee the project to make sure all CDBG administrator, whoops, my bad. We'll make sure all CDBG criteria are being followed and reported. There is no grant match required from the city. Staff recommends moving to open a public hearing. I believe there's a presentation first, though.
Yes, we do have a quick presentation. We do have Melissa Cass with us. And before we open the public hearing, we'll see your presentation.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for moving the item. I had some childcare issues tonight. So, my name is Melissa LaCase. We opened Tan Bark Molded Fiber. I think we moved in 2022 to 34 Spring Hill Road. Thank you all for having us here tonight and giving us the chance to present. And thank you, Tracy, for helping us with this application. I bring this slide up just to show that single-use plastic is considered a crisis, a climate crisis, and the number I like to pull out on this slide is the one on the upper right, which is about 50% of plastic pollution comes from packaging, and that is what Tan Bark is addressing. There'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. It has a great effect on our environment and on the animals in both the land and in the sea. Companies have wide access to the products on your left. The product on the right is what Tambark is focused on. It's called Type 3 molded fiber. It can have a very fine finish and a high-end look. I've brought some products here that I can show you when I'm done presenting. So the current Type 3 industry, you already see it everywhere, but the industry is focused on commodities. So if you're a company who needs an order quantity of 50 million parts or less per year, it's very difficult to get access to this material. You already see it everywhere. It's in cups, bowls, takeout containers, but if you need a product to be nested or to be in a mold that is got three-dimensional shapes, your only choice is single-use plastic if you have an order quantity that's less than 50 million parts per year. Until now. So our family business, LaCase & Weston, makes the machines that produce molded fiber. If you have an egg carton in your fridge, the chances that it is made on one of our company's machines are really high. They've been doing this for over 3 decades. About 5 years ago, we were getting calls from thermoform and plastic producers begging us to sell them machines because they needed access to molded fiber, because their customers were demanding that they provide them something other than single-use plastic. Taking plant fiber and molding it into shapes is not easy, so we realized we couldn't just sell people machines and be successful. So we started Tambark, and one of the biggest elements of our secret sauce is that we're just making production platforms that are smaller. This means the tooling costs are less, and also that the minimum order quantities are less. So a company can now get access to this material for as low as $2,500 to $25,000 in tooling costs, depending on their order size or the complexity of their part. And we can start at about 1,000 pieces per year. And then Tambark can also go up to about 20 million pieces per year, depending on the part. We have household names in our pipeline, and we've done no outbound selling. We're very excited about the impact we're already having. One of the things I tell everybody is a working forest, which we have an abundance of in Maine. A sustainably harvested working forest is the best carbon capture machine in the world. So at Tambark, we use Maine pulp to go into our machines, and we're already at a negative 3% carbon capture when these go into our machines. So this process was invented in Maine. It was first patented in Maine over 100 years ago, and Tambark is bringing back this wonderful, innovative product that largely stagnated in the 50s and 60s because plastic came along. It's largely seen as a very promising replacement for single-use plastic, and we're hoping to have a worldwide impact just starting in our little plant right down there on Spring Hill Road. So here are some examples of the materials. As you can see, it's from organic luxury to more natural replacements. The products on your right, if I'd be surprised if I'd be shocked if many of you didn't have that product for that company in your fridge. We're very excited about these products that we're making for them. It may seem simple, it's just a cup, but nobody's figured out how to do that out of molded fiber yet. And we prototyped it last week in our plant. So we're expanding in our Saco facility. We currently have 2 machines. We recently secured financing of actually $4 million to increase our production capacity, and we've received about $1.5 million in grants from the state of Maine and others, the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, and the USDA. We're continuing to see our pipeline grow, and we're very excited about this $100,000 CDBG, the potential for this grant. We are creating 20 jobs under the conditions of this grant, but at Saco, we're looking to hire 30 to 40 people over the next 18 months to 24 months. These jobs range along all aspects of the socioeconomic scale, and Tambark operates on a mission of shared prosperity, and we have plans to upskill our employees, and also we offer great benefits and the like. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you very much.
I'll set out some products. Well, I don't know if there's questions, but this is a product we make that's a bird's nest. It's kind of cool. It goes in this reusable plant system that goes on people's outside the walls, and people often plant plants in this, but with the bird's nest pod, you need to replace the bird's nest. So instead of using single-use plastic, they use our product. It's very hard to make this product on any machine but ours. Currently making products for the University of Maine system and for Luke's Lobsters that are very high-end and have these little boats that are beloved by all, including my children. And then last but not least, this is what we prototyped last week in our facility. And again, as far as we know, no one's figured out yet how to make this out of molded fiber. The paper cup that you get at the coffee shop often has 7 different layers of petroleum in it, and this is really exciting because it contains none of that, and it has none of the adhesives that you need to glue the paper together. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Johnston, would you like to make the motion?
I move to open the public hearing.
Motion has been made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion to open the public hearing passes 7-0. If there's any members of the public wishing to speak, please step to the podium. Okay, we're not seeing any. Councilor Johnston.
I move to close the public hearing and be it ordered that the City Council supports the submission of a CDBG Economic Development Grant application in the amount of $100,000. I move to approve the order.
Motion has been made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. Excellent presentation. It's quite exciting.
Thank you very much.
See something like that here in Saco, so congratulations. I have absolutely no problem with this whole issue, so fabulous that we can participate. I did have one question of clarification, and I think I probably want to address that to Tracy. I'm looking at the exhibit that was given to us, the Grantee Business Assurances Job Creation exhibit, and I'm reading through the language in the 3rd paragraph, and obviously there are job creation goals that are set here in this grant, and I think some of them have to do with income levels as well. That's all great, but in terms of the municipality's responsibility here, it does state here, if I'm reading this correctly, that if you do not meet those job requirements of the grant, that the state can exercise its right to seek repayment from the municipality. And so that's a risk factor. I just want to be clear in my head that I understand. And it does go on to say that the municipality may exercise its rights to seek repayment from the business itself. So are we planning to put into place an agreement that in the event, and I'll call it the unlikely event, that you cannot meet the jobs requirement specified in the grant, that we are going to be able to, we're going to have to pay the state and have some reimbursement mechanism in place to reimburse the city for that expense, is my question.
We can certainly, have something like that put in there. The state is usually pretty good as far as when it comes to these community block grants. One of the things that I'll have to do, and I'll work very closely with Melissa and her team, and that is to make sure that they do fit within that criteria. Just as Melissa had stated, they're going to be looking for above 30, 20 people.
Sure.
So only 20 people coming in will have to meet that low to moderate income, that 51%. And that's all they have to prove in regards to the state level at the Office of Community Development, that they're meeting that goal. They will work with again, with some of the workers that they already have, but there's an opportunity to bring in some of the new Mainers. It's an opportunity for them to work with the Career Center because that will be the requirement that they'll have to do on their obligation, that they're going to have to go out and make sure that they are meeting that goal. They also have other opportunities for more advanced technical people, to offer a higher type pay job. I've also spoke with them as far as on even working with the community college because they offer workforce development and programs that will help some of our companies, train folks as well as part of that. But as the grant administrator for the city, it will be my responsibility, yes.
And I appreciate all that, and I'm 99% sure that it's going to all happen, but I have a duty as a counselor to protect our taxpayers, and I take that pretty seriously. So I think that we need to have something in place, whether it's a letter of credit from your bank to the city in the event we have to honor that repayment to the state. Something as simple as that would seem to work okay, a performance bond of some type, an escrow. But I do think we would be remiss in approving this if, at least I would feel remiss in approving this if I didn't know that that fallback position was adequately in place.
And we could certainly have legal draw something up as far as that it would be an agreement, because I certainly don't want to hold them under a letter of credit and have $100,000 just sitting there, when it can be spent on what they need to do as far as for their company. But I certainly can agree, and that's if administration, and council wants me to go down that road, we could certainly have Tim draw something up as part of, receiving the grant of their obligations. And if they don't meet that obligations, then they would be required to make sure that they are the ones that pay back that grant. I've done that with other projects as well.
Okay, Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I do share, I don't want to call them concerns because I agree it's highly unlikely that it's going to happen, but there has been past examples where it does happen. So I am supportive of figuring out some kind of mechanism. I would think that couldn't we just potentially lien the equipment that they're buying, which sounds like it's in the millions of dollars, in the event they didn't meet the job requirements. But again, so whatever mechanism is created, I'm good with. Yeah, I guess just my overall thought was, it's kind of hard not to support, new employment opportunities. And I think this is a great example of an innovative company that, I'm looking forward to have create 20, 30, 40 jobs here in Saco. And, I recognize we can't discriminate, but I would highly encourage if you can find qualified Saco people, that's, even a bigger plus. So I'm happy to support this. I think this is, a great addition to Saco, something we've probably been looking for, really since Reddy came here. So thank you.
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to provide you a resource. In the next couple months, there'll be a workforce development agency moving into Main Street here. And I'm being vague because it is my employer, so I'm well aware of what's going on there. Every participant that is there would be eligible for that credit or that condition. So they'll be moving the next couple months. I hear you're looking 18 months out. So with training and all that, there is a path to success. But I do believe we do need to have the protection mechanisms, hedging if something were to not happen, just to protect us. But I do see you having some success.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, motion on the floor to close the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to close the public hearing passes 7-0. And Councilor Johnston, there is one more motion.
I think I encapsulated all in that one motion.
Did you include it into the?
Yeah,
Oh.
I believe I did. That's how it was before me.
Okay, let's go ahead and reread it when it was announced, I didn't specify it in that.
Oh, I move to approve the order.
Okay, motion has been made to approve the order by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Parks. Any additional discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Parks?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to approve the order passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you
you.
both. Okay, that now takes us to what was item A, which is now item C, and that is the first reading, Chapter 166, Public Spaces and Parks, and that is Counselor Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Staff has compiled a new draft ordinance, Chapter 166, Public Spaces and Parks. The draft ordinance has been reviewed by City Solicitor Tim Murphy. Staff recommends the City Council complete its first reading and schedule a public hearing. Move to approve the first reading of proposed ordinance, Chapter 166, Public Spaces and Parks, and further to schedule City Council's public hearing regarding the proposed ordinance on September 9th, 2024.
Okay, a motion has been made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Parks. Any discussion? Counselor Hewitt?
Would it be possible with this amendment or with this ordinance to add some wording that during school hours that only school personnel and students and invited guests would be permitted on the property? As an ed tech in the schools at Fairfield or CK Burns, there were times where people would wander onto the playground and you're supervising, several children outside and not being able to ask people to leave the premises presented some liabilities and risks for the city. Like an example could be as innocent as a grandma brings, a 2-year-old on the play set and we've got children running on and off. We don't want them to get knocked over. A teacher could wait and see, is it a manageable situation? But it gives them the opportunity, if they do think it's not an acceptable situation, to ask someone to leave. Not to completely prohibit people, but to give them that opportunity. Or if someone walked onto the playground that we weren't really comfortable with, things have happened in the past before, and it would just give teachers and ed techs and administrators that possibility.
Yep, and we do have Director Summer and Chief Clements here, whoever's able to answer that question.
So with that said, we talk to all the principals every year. The principals do have permission during school hours to ask any of the public to leave the 3 sites, CK Burns, Fairfield School, Pepper Park, and Young School, during those school hours if they so choose. One of the reasons we built up Diamond Riverside Park was because it gave them another place to encourage them to go to and so forth. But the principals, the vice principals and all that do have that jurisdiction during school hours to ask anybody to leave the premises at that point.
To clarify on that, is that like at Fairfield where we have the fence boundary between the actual playground and then the front part of the lawn? Does that account for the entire area?
The entire area.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Berman.
Thank you. I could be supportive of that. I think it addresses some of the prior statements I've made, but I am curious if Director Summers, do you see a conflict with that from your side of things if we were to actually memorialize something in the ordinance that would kind of, I guess, in a way, give the school department full discretion over the public park?
So the hardest part about that, they are city property. They are public parks that the city has the right to go. When you're looking at this now, you're looking at a 3 or 4 year vision down the road when the schools vacate these properties and they return back to being city parks. And then the schools being out at Millbrook area over there, you'll have less of the public attending these the school area and more of the public's coming to the city parks. So it's one of those things where, again, if you're asking me, I kind of keep it alone. Again, give the permission to the principals, the vice principals, the access and the ability to remove the public if they so choose, if they deem that it's if these kids or people are misbehaving or adding a issue to the playground that they don't want to be associated with.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I see two things that I want to comment on here. One is I do have some concerns about limiting the public access to public lands, and that's in conflict with me about the need to keep kids safe and schools safe. And so there's an inherent kind of conflict that I'm wrestling with about this. But the other piece is part of the purpose of this ordinance, as I understand it, is to memorialize and really kind of operationalize some of our policies that have been unspoken or spoken only through signs and make them formal. And it sounds like what you're describing is a rather informal policy in which we ask principals and assistant principals to ask people who are disruptive to leave, resting on their authority as principal or assistant principal.
Right.
That's not kind of codified in ordinance. And so that principle makes me a little bit nervous too. And while I appreciate Councilor Hewitt's kind of intent, there's the other word that she used, and I'm sure it wasn't specifically crafted that way, but people who are undesirable, and of course that means different things, and there's a bit of a judgment call there, right? That's in the eyes of the people who are sitting and watching, which I think opens us up to complaints of discrimination or inequity or violating public access. And so this strikes me as a complicated issue, but if we indeed are enforcing provisions like this, I guess my default would be I'd like to see it in the ordinance to clarify some of these things.
You could, but in 3 years or 4 years, you're taking it back out, because then these properties are no longer being accessible by schools. With the new schools being built, they are coming back to the city as public property or public entities of the city's parks that they would have use for on a regular basis. So again, you're looking at a very minimal time of usage of the kids outside in the sense of morning recess, lunch recess. So you have probably a 30, 40-minute window around 9:30, and then probably again a 40-minute window during lunchtime that these kids are outside. And if you're going to limit the access of everybody during the whole time they're out there for the whole day from 8:30 to 2:30, that's a long time for some kid some parent or grandparent who's got a 3-year-old kid to not use access to that property as well.
Councilor Gunn?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is more of a clarifying question here. So from what I understand it, the principals of these schools have the agency to, as we're phrasing it, ask people to leave. Now, so the public's aware, that's more of a turn of phrase, right? I mean, if the person, not to use the phrase undesirable, but let's say disruptive, something that exists in any of our ordinances when it comes to behavior in public. If there's a someone is judged to be disruptive, the asking to leave essentially it's not an option, right? The principal can say leave, or I'm calling the police.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're all clear on that one.
That is correct.
So we're not giving the public agency if they're being disruptive, though, so let's be clear on that.
And we have that same policy during summer camps.
Okay.
So when we accessing Burn School, Fairfield School, even the community center, if we have a disruptive person on site or somebody who who is acting strange or whatever, we do have that capabilities of asking them to leave. And if they do not leave, we have the right to call the cops.
And I guess my follow-up is, since, yes, it is, public property, public park, but because they're adjacent to schools, we're giving the principals sort of like the added authority that they wouldn't otherwise have, though. Of course, I assume that if something similar to Councilor Hewitt's amendment, for lack of a better term, were added, it would not preclude, say, a passing police officer or a member of your staff who witnessed somebody being disruptive on the school parks to have them leave under the same conditions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Under those conditions, I would be amendable to what Councilor Hewitt had in question, because at the same time, we're talking about teachers and ed techs trying to keep kids safe between just their moral right to do so and the insurance reasons. I don't think it's a big ask when we have plenty of places to take kids that are under age of 5 during a school day, but that's just my opinion as a non-parent, and I'm sure I'll get lettuce. Thank you.
Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think I'm going to take more of a position of identical to Councilor Berman's, because there is conflict here. If we have parks, but we don't have a lot of playground structured parks. They are at our schools. I know of the tot lot, but don't call it a playground, call it 2 swings and a tiny slide, tot slide. For now, I'm kind of guarded from prohibiting access to the parks near the schools. Obviously, we have regular law that we can apply, but to add an amendment, I'm kind of reserved. However, we do have a precedence of restricting access to public parks. If you go to Young School and want to go play softball in the baseball field, there's a sign there that says you can't, you need permission. What if we were to look at, down the road, creating the playgrounds at the schools in an enclosure and apply that principle there? And not, because that's going to open up the inventory to all of our other parks that are used by schools.
So the hardest, when you talk about enclosure, I struggle there because I don't like the idea of fencing out a public park or a public property around a playground. To me, it feels like you're trying to control the outside, which is what you're trying to do. But again, that's not what a public property or public entity should be.
But we do it to the baseball field.
You do it for a baseball field just for the purpose of home runs, for the home run fence and so forth, and to protect somebody who doesn't get hit by a foul ball. That's why there's fencing around baseball and softball fields. But none of the city parks, in the sense of a playground, is truly fenced in. So when you begin to fence it, you begin to restrict, and when you begin to restrict, and now you've got.
Well, what about Tuttle Inn? Our
It's not city property.
Because we lease it?
But it's not city property. So the only playgrounds we have outside of city parks, outside of schools, is Diamond Riverside, that has a playground, and then we push them into neighborhood parks like Shaggy Woods, Ryan Farm, the one out in North Saco, off of Lincoln, Boothby Park. That's where we start pushing. And then we can put that on our website to encourage people who, during school hours, to go to these playgrounds and these locations.
But none of them
they are aware.
mimic the greatness of like the Burn School. Like,
I do.
Out of all playgrounds, the 3rd through 5th tend to get the best one.
Well, they're bigger. They're
Yeah,
big,
exactly.
They're the biggest playgrounds.
This is where I'm in this position where I don't want to restrict during the day, especially because we already have laws that can be applied.
Correct.
Disruption.
And we can encourage families who are in this position that have younger kids between the community center, the Diamond Riverside Park, and then some of the neighborhood parks. We can continue to advertise and push that information out that during school hours, this is where we recommend that you take your kids during those times.
Recommend is just a recommendation. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, having had the last several minutes to think about this, while I certainly appreciate the intent, hearing that kind of already have an understanding, I'll deem it as that, the administration has the ability to, move somebody along. I'm pretty certain Fairfield still has the tot swing.
They do.
So it's one of maybe 3 in the entire city. Two in the entire
Fairfield
city.
and Diamond Riverside.
That has that, and having been a parent of small children myself not too long ago, that was one of the locations that we would take the kids during school hours. So I wouldn't want to forbid that. So I guess, like I said, I appreciate what you've presented, but I think that if we already have it somewhat in play, it kind of makes sense to leave it as is for the next 3 years and hope we have a new school and we won't have this discussion about it. Outside of that, I don't think I have too much to add other than I did state previously that I was thinking about some future amendments. Admittedly, I actually lost the notebook that I wrote everything in. I'm sure I will find it. It's just buried probably under all the other notebooks I have. So I wasn't prepared to bring that, but I will get it to council prior to the public hearing. And then just additionally, to Mr. Biggs' point, I mean, he did share those photographs with myself. I'll pass them all. I'm not saying that you need to get down there right away, but it was actually rather disturbing to see the images that he did send us this afternoon, particularly when, as Mr. Big indicated, I mean, I spent a lot of time at Diamond Riverside as a kid. Back back when it was mostly woods. So it's always been a resource, right? It's the waterway. I mean, we've got generations, my parents included, that spend, a lot of time trying to protect that river, and it not long ago was one of the dirtiest rivers in the state of Maine. It's not that way anymore. But to see, again, separate the unhoused element of it, just the overall lack of respect for that resource is concerning to me. I mean, you're talking about trash that's basically in our waterways. You're talking about needles. You're talking about beer cans. We can't have that. So, again, that really just solidified more so my desire for this ordinance. There's no question. We still have to address the unhoused, which we can't all do at once. It's a far larger topic than just this. And I just state that because I have, received some, I guess I deem it pushback or negative feedback on this ordinance based on, well, you're attacking the homeless or unhoused. That's not it. This is about protecting our lands and ensuring that they're usable for all. And I will, again, continue to stand by that. I get more so after seeing those photos. I mean, we have entire beds down there right now. It's disgusting, to be honest. And again, anybody, and we're not talking about the back lot, we're talking about the front lot that we just spent a lot of money, renovating so that we could all enjoy it. So I'm more than willing to volunteer my own time to go pick up the stuff, but we got to be able to prevent that from continuously happening, whether you live behind it or you frequent the park. It's not acceptable by any stretch of the imagination, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so there is a motion on the floor to move this to a public hearing on September 9th. I guess first off, everybody is okay with moving it forward as is? Okay. All right, roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Parks?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, so that now takes us to item B, which was then C, which is now D.
I need a flow chart.
And that is the first reading of the parking plan and fee schedule changes for 142 Main Street parking lot. And that is Counselor Johnston.
Swear, I'm going to figure this out. I got all these screens, and I
You
still
got them all
can't-
tonight.
I can't figure out how to. It's just like I said when we introduced this. It takes a while for, I guess, an old dog to learn new tricks. Yeah, I know. I appreciate it. I still want to figure out what I'm doing wrong. We are on B, so I click B, and hopefully a window pops up. Hopefully, I'm on the Wi-Fi. Listen, I am as low tech as as I shared with you all today. I got locked out of my email last week and didn't even realize it. All of a sudden, I'm like, wow, there's no email coming in. Realize that it's not going to my iPhone. Okay.
Get it?
In September 2023, the city purchased a downtown parcel for expansion of public parking opportunities for shopping, dining, and public transportation access. A portion of this lot is leased to the abutting apartment complex for tenant parking. Remaining spaces shall be designated for short or long-term parking in free or paid parking areas as determined by the City Council. Staff recommends the City Council complete its first reading and schedule the public hearing. I move to approve the first reading of the parking plan and fee schedule changes for 142 Main Street parking lot and further to schedule the public hearing for September 9th, 2024.
Motion has been made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Parks. Any discussion? Counselor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I like the new layouts and the division entirely. I don't have any concerns about that. I do have a question about some of the red line language, and in particular, section C3, which is now crossed off. And it used to read, to meet the funding requirements set forth in 118-25, Parking permit fees are to be split as follows: 33.33% to the City General Fund, 33.33% to the Camp Ellis Fund, and 33.33% to the Bayview Fund. I know that the Camp Ellis Fund is utilized for pier renovations and maintenance. The Bayview Fund, I believe, to maintain that parking lot and beach structures. And I don't see a mechanism for continuing these funds without this language here. And so I'm curious what the consequences of that strike-through are for those funds, and how the Camp Ellis Fund and Bayview Fund will continue to receive revenue to exist with these changes.
As Director Fox is coming up, one of the things that we would want to do is not memorialize in ordinance these directives to various financial aspects, but certainly from a council policy perspective, we could implement what you want. So
Good. Well,
Director Fox.
I can't put it better than that. It was just to remove it from ordinance, not knowing what all of the income fees could be from the different parking lots and different parking mechanisms, and just put it into the budget process instead as you allocate special revenue funds.
Does that answer your question, Council Berman?
It answers the question, I guess. My understanding is that the original intent was that the parking spots on the Camp Ellis Pier would go towards the Camp Ellis Fund, and the parking spots in the Bayview lot will go towards the Bayview Fund to pay for the periodic maintenance and upkeep of those structures, and keep them separate and distinct from the general fund, and provide for those facilities. And I guess I'd like to keep that intent to the degree possible. If this language isn't the right way to do it, I'm open to different language, but I think those funds have served important purposes for the maintenance of those public resources, and I'd hate to see that get lost over changes, over incidental changes for a new parking lot.
If I might, Your Honor.
Yes, please, City Administrator
Well,
Branco.
we certainly will follow, it's not that we're going to put everything and immediately change. It's just that we want to have the flexibility to come to the council and say, there's more coming in on this particular one, or we don't know what that's going to be. It's a lot easier to do a policy revision than an ordinance revision. So certainly we know what the intent is, and we'll continue to use that intent.
Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Again, Council Berman and I are sharing the same brainwave, because I highlighted that too with the question as to why it was removed, which I think we've gotten an answer. But I will point out that Camp Ellis Pier and parking lot is governed by Chapter 118, so those funds are memorialized to be utilized for that specific purpose. So if that was your concern, I would say that's protected. Now, how I always thought it was the total amount of the Camp Ellis parking lot went specifically to that. That might not be the case. But I am still curious about the Bayview and then any subsequent lot. Are we just going to put this towards the general fund? Because personally, I think we should have a dedicated fund where it's just strictly going to the maintenance of those lots. And additionally, I guess my question was, when it came to parking violations in those lots, could we also dedicate those funds to the maintenance of those lots? Right now, I believe they just go into a fund. So
Yeah.
just a thought going forward, I guess, for how we designate those funds.
I would just have to take a look to see if there are any restrictions on violations. Sometimes under statutes, there might be different ways you have to utilize those funds, but is there anything you can think of, Chief?
Not that I'm aware of, sir. I think because these parking violations are in city ordinance, then the funding comes to the city.
Okay. What we can do is look and see how difficult it might be to extract those to make sure they go into the right fund. So I'll take a look at it. I'll talk to the finance director tomorrow.
Okay. Councilor Retcher?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I could go either way on this one. In the end, council's still making a decision on where the funds go. It'd be in the budget process. The administrator would say, we're going to expect this much in revenue. We're going to expect this much in expenses in this lot. So I could see that working well. The way it's written, I can't really support. I would want the funds, because now we have it all set up through electronic. I'd want the funds that occur at the train station to stay at the train station. If we went this approach, where we separate it, we can look at it in totality and separate that way, or if we're going to individualize it, because back in the day, I believe the only permit fees were down at the beach, correct?
Correct.
And the city got a share, right? That's what the general fund was for, was saying, we're going to split them all, you get a third, you get a third, we get a third. So there is a cost to implementing this. So if we are going to separate it into these 3 different areas where we collect permit fees, I'd want those permit fees to stay within the area, what's there. For example, if obviously the train stations probably have more maintenance fees than the other two parks, and vice versa. You also got Bayview, but then major storms, we get funding through that, so it gets very complicated on where this money can go. So that's why, one, I think it's easier just put in the general budget, but if we do codify it, we shouldn't be just splitting it third, because it made sense under that model, but it doesn't make sense under our current model.
So I would just say that, again, I could go either way too, but I guess my concern, just based of years of being here and seeing council come and go, you put it in the general fund, and there is the potential for then a future council to look at that as a revenue source, whereas at least I myself don't envision it as a revenue source. It's there to create some level, it probably won't pay for all of it, but some maintenance for the lot so that they at least contribute. That way, those paying those fees can look around and say, oh, we got new striping or new asphalt. Otherwise, you could get yourself into a situation, like I said, future council goes, well, we're going to take that, rob Peter to pay Paul in a tight budget year. And I think that's why years ago, council or prior council created the Camp Ellis Fund, because we had parking, my entire life, going back to the 70s, that, charged, but it wasn't always dedicated, at least I don't believe, to that specific use. As long as I've been around, it's been, okay, it's paying for those who use it. When we added Bayview parking, those funds just automatically got dedicated to that fund, and I remember at the time thinking, I disagreed with it, because I thought that they should have had a separated fund. And so now that we're adding more parking lots, I think they should be separated.
Well, that's where I
separated out.
Separate the
It's just a
fund.
matter.
Councilor Archer? Yep, Councilor Johnson. Are you finished?
I can be finished.
Okay, if not, but hold on to wait to be recognized. Councilor Berman?
Yeah, my little molehill is turning into a mountain. There is a separate Camp Ellis and Bayview funds now, but I'd also just point out that if you look at section 118.25 of Saco Code, the Camp Ellis Pier and Parking Lot Fund, section B, source of revenues. All revenues derived from the pier and parking lot, including but not limited to fees from parking cars and fees for mooring and docking, shall be deposited into this account, referring to the Camp Ellis account. And C, use of revenues. Funds in the Camp Ellis Pier and Parking Lot account shall be used for the expansion and maintenance of the Camp Ellis Parking Lot, pier, floats, city-owned moorings, waterways, and other marine-related uses as recommended by the Saco Coastal Waters Commission and approved by the Director of DPW or the Saco City Council. Chapter 118 places pretty severe restrictions on the revenues from Camp Ellis parking and pier fees, and also the use of those funds. So I don't think the parking ordinance by itself changes section 118. So if that's our intent, I think we need to go back and revisit section 118 and probably should bring the Harbor Master and Coastal Waters Commission into the discussion or at least inform them.
Correct.
City Administrator Branco?
I'll defer to City Council for now, and then I'll jump in if you want.
Oh, I was just going to say that was my initial point with 118, but that's specific to Bayview and Camp Ellis, and as I said, I think Bayview should be separate, Camp Ellis should be separate, and then whatever we have for downtown lots or future lots probably should have their own, mechanisms, not all lumped in one.
Right, and let me just put it this way. By taking this out, you have a lot of flexibility. And one memorandum can fix it like that. If the city council says to me and votes and says, we want to put the money here, here, and here for fiscal year X, that's where we'll go.
Councilor Archer?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up with what we were just stating then, that requires the need to delete Section 3.
What's that? Sorry.
Well, based on what we were just talking about, that requires the need to delete Section 3 here, because we have two competing ordinances. So we need to get rid of 3 or drastically amend something.
If I might, I think the most expeditious way to deal with this is to take it out, and if a council member in the future wants to bring forward a policy that would require us to do X, Y, and Z, we would do it. And that way you have the option of being able to do it one meeting, or just as a council consensus, rather than changing the ordinance.
Okay, anyone else? Councilor Johnston?
Just one other item. I had previously mentioned, and this is some time ago, probably soon after we entered in or bought the lot, council has never ratified the lease, which is a requirement under just about everything I've read it on our books, and historical action by council, which I recognize it's already been signed, so it would be a retroactive, I guess, approval, which I'm okay with at this point. I just like to see the lease between the city and River House Realty, I guess it is, LLC. But I would also like, so I think we should, as part of this, on the same night, just approve that so it's all together approved, if that makes sense.
So if I understand correctly, we will take a look at the lease and pull it out and have the city council ratify it.
Yes, that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Can that be added to the motion as an amendment? To have that included, or just have that included?
I think what you could do at the next time, the 9th, we could put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Just to ratify.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so motion on the floor is to schedule the public hearing for September 9th, 2024. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Okay, so that now takes us to item which was formerly D and now E, and that is the public hearing, final reading for the chapter amendment, section 2.01 and section 4.01, composition of municipal officers and compensation. That is Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the charter as described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by the council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion has been made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, heard Josh. Councilor Parks, second. Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to open the public hearing passes 7-0. Public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to please speak, please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening again, Ron Michaud, Bayview Road here in Saco. I can see you earning your monies. It's nice to see that process moving forward, all the questions involved. In this hybrid meeting issue, I'm not familiar with personally, but it sounds like it may be a way to recruit counselors in the future if you can get more folks involved. because as I understand, one of the reasons this proposal is before you to send to the public, because there's a general concern is lack of candidates stepping forward and wanting to participate in the political process in our community. Well, for someone who spent over 20 years in elected office and ran 11 campaigns, I can tell you there are people out there that want to oppose you at times, and that's all part of the process. You want to get candidates, do a South Portland reevaluation or a mill increase, and you'll get candidates for office. It just takes the right issue to generate that interest. All that being said, I wouldn't normally be here. I have not, frankly, spent a whole lot of time. I did my part, and I left the council years ago. But what caught my eye was the proposal that you have in front of you to send to the public is we're moving into the 5 figures now. And when my wife mentioned, hey, they're looking to increase the mayor's salary, nothing personal, to $10,000, my ears perked up. I mean, $2,000, $3,000, $3,600, $4,000. That's money, but $10,000, we're getting up there. So I said, well, let me look at this for a minute and think about it, because I was on the council the last time we raised this, back in November of '96. I went from 300 to 1,200 for councilors. I had been on the council before that, and I ran. It wasn't the money that brought me forward, obviously. And it isn't the money that brings you folks here every night or every week, spending all this time for the community. It's wanting to help our community that brings people together. And it's usually an issue, some sort of an issue that got you involved initially, and you felt that, you know what, I can do something positive for our community, and I want to step forward. So I don't think increasing any payments will make a huge difference in candidates for the office, nor will it retain them on the council. It's really how the council works together as a team that maintains people. When you have a very divisive council, and I've had all sorts of councils in my career, you can see how they work differently depending on who's in there. But there are 3 little items I would like you to consider possibly as you move this forward. Let's start with the amount. I went back and looked at what the agreement was in November of '96. It was about $1,200, I think, for councilors, if I remember right, and $3,600 for the mayor. If you argue to the public, we're doing the same work, we just have not kept up with inflation, and you kind of infer that in your CPI argument. If you look at $1,200 and CPI increase to today's dollars, it is not $5,000. I know you went to neighboring communities, you say, well, Biddeford may do it, or Scarborough, other communities have a salary basis, but I don't think that's the way you ought to do it. I think it's justified to go to the public. All we're doing is bringing it up to today's dollar value. That's reasonable. But $2,600 or 24 in that range, $2,600, $2,500 would be about $1,200 today. And as far as the mayor goes, it'd be about $7,500 in that range. And historically, the mayor got 3 times what a councilor got. Okay. So I know 10 and 5 are nice round numbers, but 10 is a number that people will catch their attention. And I can assure you, if you were a councilor in South Portland tonight, you would not be doing this to the public. Because you're not going to get a lot of flack on this right now because things are going along pretty well. The budget was good. Our city manager found a way to bring the mill rate down. Everybody's happy. But down the road, we know that isn't always going to be true. I was here in 2008 when we went through the crisis. There are times that things are going to get tough. And the public's going to say, what are you doing? You're increasing your salary 4 times the amount we were making, and here we are having to deal with this. You won't get
I
much.
don't mean to interrupt, but we do have a 3-minute over, but if you'd like to just wrap it up.
These elected officials are slap on. So anyhow, I would suggest perhaps considering just increasing by CPI. Next thing is the use of the CPI on an ongoing basis. I don't think that's appropriate at all. You're not employees. You're elected officials. You're here to do something for the community. A CPI chained event basically gives you an automatic pay raise theoretically on a yearly basis. I'm not sure that's a good thing for the council, ever. I don't think the legislature uses that. I know the congressional officials don't. I don't think locally we should do either. That shouldn't be in there. That's a CPI yearly thing, is an employee issue, and you're not employees. And the last is the effective date of the increase. I heard the argument that it goes to the public, the voters approve it, we're all set. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that either. I think the increase, that if it gets passed, should be implemented each time a new councilor runs for office. If you're in office when this passes in November, you shouldn't be getting the pay raise until you run again and be reelected. It should require a new election. Just some thoughts, and thanks for your time. Sorry for being over.
Oh, no, you're fine. Thank you. And thank you for your service. Okay, is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Yes, Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street. I could have missed a step by not being here recently, but I remember being here or watching on video that it was a staggered type term when this was going to happen. I would like to hear from you as was that changed, and just educate me on that. From what I read now, what it will be in November, the staggered part that was discussed, I remember, is no longer there. I do agree with the staggered term as far as when it happens at what Mr. Michaud just said, instead of January 1st, 2025. Wait until that moment happens again when you're reelected or elected. As far as the increase, I understand what Mr. Michaud said about the 10,000. That 5 figures is going to trigger a lot of people. I was around for many decades. I remember it being $300 for a long time. This is a dedication for you, but as a layperson and the due diligence that I do as my civic duty to the city, I want you to be compensated more fairly. What those magic numbers are, I'm not sure, but I just wouldn't want you to turn off people in their voting once they see $10,000, a 5-figure number. I hate to say 9999, but but I do believe that that you should be compensated more than what you are. It's been a long time coming, but what those magic numbers are, I don't know. What happened to the staggered conversation that was before? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, not seeing anyone seeking recognition. Councillor Hatch?
I move to close the public hearing.
Motion has been made to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councillor Johnston. Roll call vote. Councillor Archer?
Aye.
Councillor Parks?
Yes.
Councillor Gunn?
Yes.
Councillor Berman?
Yes.
Councillor Hatch?
Yes.
Councillor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councillor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion to close the public hearing passes 7-0. Councillor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. The City of Saco hereby ordains and approves the final reading of Saco City Charter Amendment Number 1, Charter Change Section 2.01 and Section 4.01, Composition of Municipal Offices and Compensation, and further orders that the amendment be placed on the November 5th, 2024 ballot. This amendment, if approved by the voters, would have an effective date of January 1st, 2025.
Motion has been made by Councillor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councillor Johnston. Any discussion? Councillor Johnston, then Councillor Hatch.
Thank you. I would say I recognize that Mayor Michaud has left the room, but I do want to comment that I have, the utmost respect for Mayor Michaud, having, as a small child, witnessed him as a councilor, but also having served under him as mayor. And I would agree with a lot of what he said. And I think I have been rather guarded on this issue going back to my very first term when it first really kind of cropped up from new members of council and mayor at the time, with the idea of an increase in pay back then. I remember stating at the time, we shouldn't be doing this for the money, and I still believe that. I don't think any of us do. I don't think that the compensation that's been presented really changes it all that much. And we've had that conversation at prior meetings. I think, when I think about it in my own instance, again, I remember when council was $300 and the mayor was $1,200. And I think that increase back in '96 was, recognizing that it had fallen behind just given what costs were then, or time commitments too. So, here we are almost 30 years later, and you have those compensation rates frozen at the same. So I agree, I don't think this necessarily is going to, the floodgates are going to open. We're going to have all these people, and that's really the intent. I want people to run for the right reasons, but I also need to recognize that there is a time commitment. There is a loss of income, and as I've said, I have said this publicly. I say it to counselors all the time. I said it today to Councilor Hatch. I do this for free, but that's also because I was brought up in this. And it took me a while to recognize that. Like, there's an expectation, I guess, because, again, I grew up around it. It was familiar to me. I, thought it was my, duty to kind of throw my hat into the ring. But at the same time, I know from personal experience in just the last, we'll say, 2 or 3 election cycles, when I'm talking to people that have said, hey, I'm interested in this ward or that ward or a school board, and then I tell them how much the compensation is, and as I said to you today, Councilor Hatch, the response was, well, you're either a saint or crazy, and I'm certainly not a saint, so I must be the latter, and that's, verbatim what my response has been, because it's so instant, really. It's like, okay, so you want me to run for an office that, if it's contested, and I can only speak to several former mayors, recent mayors that I know of, you're talking about a contested race spending close to $10,000 to run a real campaign in the contested race. So you're going to run for office. Right now it's $3,600. Pretty much your entire pay is going to be eaten up in a campaign. And then at that point, you're basically losing whatever you may have been receiving in compensation. I know, I do things around the cheap to begin with, and I don't think I've ever ran a campaign, a contested campaign for, less than several $1,000s. So again, you're eating up all that compensation. So I don't know if it solves, the lack of participation, but certainly, as we sit here today, we do it with personnel. We hear about money, or compensation's not high enough. It's the same thing I hear with people my age and below when we start talking about, throwing your hat in the ring. It's kind of like, well, so you want me to not just lose money, but also lose time with my family. And that's really where it comes, for me personally, when I look at it, it's like, no, I can't get that time back. I recognize that. I said tonight, both my children were doing open house at schools. They both wanted me to be there, but I looked at them, and was like, well, I have a commitment. But it's real easy, especially as they get smarter and older, particularly if they take after their father. One day they're going to look at me and say, well, that doesn't pay you anything. Why are you doing it? And so there is that conflict where you have to look. And again, I lived it, because that's the same comments I've certainly made to my parents, certainly to my father, when he was missing football games or whatnot. And so, yeah, the compensation or the increase doesn't get those times back, but it at least helps. I mean, I look at it and say, well, right now, for 10 years, we went this route. And as we've seen tonight, I'm not great with it. But I did that recognizing that it was saving the city some kind of money. I still print out, as I think Councilor Hatch does, a lot. That's what my cost. I go through ink and paper, so I've saved the city money over the years, but have harmed myself financially, right? So, I mean, I don't know, like I said, we've had the conversation. I'm okay with the rate. I indicated to Councilor Hatch earlier today that when we first were discussing this, I just pulled up a basic inflation calculator and arrived at roughly the same amount that Mayor Michoud had indicated, around $2,500. And I was comfortable with that at the time. But then I also looked at it and said, well, I'm going to recognize that we're probably not going to see a significant increase. So why not be ahead of the curve than behind like we have been? The compensation of the mayor of the city of Biddeford has been set at $10,000 for as long as I can remember. I think that we ask a lot of the person that's in that role to be pretty much everywhere. As a counselor, I have kind of the option to be like, well, I can go to that or I can't go to that. When I look at the duties of the mayor, it's pretty much, unless you're really sick or you can't, for whatever reason, be there, you should be there. That's how I've always viewed it. I think that individual, whoever it should be compensated to recognize the time, they're losing from, their families and their jobs. I mean, really, in a way, you almost have to be a retiree, someone that's self-employed, or have an employer that's very flexible to even be up here to begin with. I know, again, speaking of my family, it's because we've all been self-employed that we've been able to do. And there's been opportunities that I have not taken that was a financial detriment to myself because I said, well, I have a council commitment, when I had opportunities to go private sector and be paid, like a regular human being instead of, being crazy and working for myself. But I understand that it has allowed me the flexibility to do these other things. So I guess, like I said, I'm good with what has been presented. I would agree, and after having read, over this, I do agree with Mayor Mishu's statement about the annual adjustment. While when that was first, presented, I thought it made sense. I did when Councilor Hatch presented that. But after some thought, I have two concerns with it. The first being that in a way, if we look at the way the rest of the charter language is drafted, it tells us that we have the ability to set our annual salary, but only after it's approved by referendum. So in a way, this circumvents that language, or are we in a position where every year, because we've now changed language that would give us an adjustment based off non-union increases, are we going to have that referendum every year? Or are we trying to memorialize permanently, which again, we're circumventing the spirit of the charter, which is, hey, if you want an increase, you go to the voters, they vote up or down. And then additionally, while maybe lesser of a concern, but I could see, a scenario being created where you have future councilors that say, well, I want a pay increase. So instead of being pragmatic with what's presented as that increase for non-union, you're like, oh, well, yeah, 6% sounds good because it benefits you. So it is self-serving there. So that is my concern, and I mean, you just do a 4% increase, and that seems to be the average these days for non-union increase. That's $200 in year one, and then it compounds. So that I do have steep concerns with, and I think, Mayor Mishu would address that too. So I would, make the amendment to strike that language altogether. As proposed, including with the school boards.
Okay, so there is an amendment on the floor made by Councilor Johnson to strike out the wording and keeping the compensation the same, but removing the COLA
that whole sentence.
Annual increase.
Yep.
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Gunn, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without getting into the weeds about whether it circumvents the particulars of the charter, although I'm certainly sensitive to that, though, and obviously want to go whatever the right route is, I have been supportive of this aspect of the amendment from Councilor Hatch for the simple reason that it's ironic that Councilor Mishu was here tonight, former Mayor Mishu was here tonight, because I remember he, many years ago, was in the audience as a private citizen and came to the council to speak against the notion to go from 2-year terms that were in odd years to 3-year staggered terms, foreseeing many of the problems that would come from that. One of them is the very practical, call it political, call it PR, a situation where you're never going to have a situation where theoretically the entire council is all up at the same time, which means anything that can be construed as quote-unquote self-serving is always going to have a political bent to it. And by tying it to COLA, I thought Councilor Hatch came up with a perfectly equitable and more than fair way to get around that, because it's not as if the council would ever be in a situation, unless they really wanted to like take the whole thing apart and start from scratch, to give themselves a raise based on a flat amount or a flat percentage, because it was tied to something that was sort of not exactly in our control. And I think that kind of was a creative way to get around basically the unintended consequences of going to a staggered term system, and hence why I've been, one of the many reasons why I've been, I mean, I'm amendable to this entire amendment in its principle, though, but I thought it was a creative way to get around realpolitik, for lack of a better term, and I would hope that we retain it, because otherwise we will have some form of this conversation every couple of years when it really doesn't do us any good, though, and at the end of the day, for all the reasons that Councilor Johnston had mentioned, in terms of why this raising this pay is equitable, I fully support, and there's no reason to have to rehash it every year to reconvince the public that our time is worth compensation, despite the fact that we're all here for civic reasons. I'm not going to bore the audience with, how much I love civics and serving my community, because the fact that we're all here is indicative of that. But at the same time, to Councilor Johnston's point, if you dedicate the amount of time that you should dedicate to this job, it can be of a financial detriment, and you should not have to, shouldn't be one or the other. You should be well compensated to at least alleviate your losses when you decide to jump in and serve your community in what's often a thankless task. So I would hope that the amendment that Councilor Hatch has proposed stays as he has presented it, because I think it is a sound addition to how we do business. Thank you.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the discussion so far, which I think is centering around two issues. One is what's the appropriate level of compensation, and I absolutely agree with the discussion that at $1,200 serving on council costs you money, and at $5,000 you probably won't make money, but at least you won't lose it. I don't think it's an unintended effect that we have to go back to the voters to increase the compensation. In fact, I think that's the intended effect of the charter. And while my initial reaction to the COLA language was that will make it easier, we won't have to do that again. In fact, I think we should have to do that again. I think that's the purpose, is that it's actually the voters that decide what their councilors are worth, whether councilors are worth compensating fairly, whether serving on council should cost you money, or whether it shouldn't. I think the $5,000 is reasonable. It does exceed what the inflation has been since 1996, but I think it brings it up to a rate where hopefully we'll attract a few more council members. I think we won't no longer be losing money serving as council, but I think if we want to increase it further than that in several years, we should go back to the public and ask them. And if that occurs every few years, and some years the public says yes, and some years the public says no, I think that's what the charter intends, which is why I seconded the motion and will be supporting the amendment to strike that language.
Okay, anyone else? Councilor Hatch, then Councilor Archer.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. I brought forth the COLA adjustment, and Councilor Gunn, I appreciate the sentiment that you expressed positively. But as I listened to the debate, one of the reasons why I thought it was important to put that in was, would we have to wait another 28 years to get a raise? And I don't think that's, I won't be here, but I don't think that's fair to anybody who chooses to sit in this role, because we all know the amount of work it takes to do it right. I think economic times today, with all due respect to former Mayor Michaud, are a lot different today than they were then. Economic pressures on individuals to serve in roles like this does create, I'm sure we can go up and down the dais, and I'm on the semi-retired end of the scale, so I'm not sure I'm as sensitive to that issue as perhaps you, but I want to be respectful of the fact that you folks are making financial sacrifices to serve your community, and I think that's commendable, but how far do we push that? And so the numbers that we have originally proposed, I think, are appropriate. And I'm sort of changing my tune a little bit about the COLA adjustment. I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that perhaps future councils, when they get to a point where they feel that, an additional raise is necessary, that we go back before the public and ask them to grant us that privilege to embed it in the charter as an automatic is probably, I think I'm willing to see it disappear. So it's a tough decision. So I'm gonna be supporting this amendment to remove the COLA adjustment from the language. Thank you.
Councilor Archer?
Well, Councilor Hatch just made it easier because I was debating between the COLA or not, because I think where I was getting more caught up with the COLA was we were connecting it to what we gave to employees. Where I was more on, we should look at what Social Security does and use that number. That way our decision-making is completely out of the process, is whatever the Social Security and the VA determine, because that number is the same. Social Security increase and VA increase are the same amount. And using the federal government to determine that. But as I just mentioned, Councilor Hatch just made it easier because now I don't really have to argue that. So with that in mind, I'm fine. And to be honest, I'm fine with I think the councilor is getting the better deal on this one, which I'm okay with compared to the mayor. But when we were talking about CPI increases and all that, we were using one form of a measurement in order to recognize pay disparity and all that good stuff. So I looked at 96 and what minimum wage was. It was 4.25.
Yeah.
So it's gone up 300%. That since then, it's now 14.15, just about 300%, which is in 100% alignment of what the mayor's rate should be. So I am 100% supportive of what the mayor's rate should be because it is 300% of what the minimum wage was back almost 28 years ago. For us, if we're not doing the COLA, let's kind of catch ourselves up, surpass a little bit, recognizing few years will catch up to that mark, and then at that point, another debate can happen. So with Councilor Hatch's future amendment to delete, I'll support it.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
No.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Okay, back to the original motion. Any other discussion? Councilor Berman, then Councilor Johnston.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The other issue that I think was raised in the public comments and that I've been thinking a lot about tonight is both the fairness and the optics of enacting a change in compensation that takes place all at once on January 1st. That's essentially voting ourselves a raise, something that I've been uncomfortable with and is a reason why I didn't bring forth this amendment. I was waiting to do it until I was up for election. That way I wouldn't be voting myself a raise. Now, some of the discussion we had was about the fairness, both practically in terms of implementing it, but also just in terms of theoretical fairness of having different counselors receive different compensations for the same position. That's a pretty persuasive argument. Another way of addressing that is to move the effective date a little bit further into the future, right? If it didn't take place on January 1st, 2025, but did take effect, right, voted on now, but taking effect in 2026 or 2027, it would go into effect for everybody at the same time after all the positions had come up for election.
Councilor Berman, I do not believe that can happen. We did have that issue with the, actually, office of the mayor. We had intended it to be a year out
And you can't.
And City Clerk Hughes said it had to be within a certain number of days of the election.
Never mind. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston?
Yeah, I just, again, that same subject, I would say that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor Hatch, you had never officially presented that amendment as far as the timeline for compensation. It was a subject that you had presented, but it wasn't in amendment form. And I think at that time I spoke to, again, I don't want to necessarily say the unfairness of it, but again, from that perspective, it's, you could create animosity unnecessarily, just given you could have a counselor such as myself that has another 2 years on their term, and in January, there'll be a new counselor in Ward 1, probably continuation of Ward 3, but certainly in Ward 1, and I would be, looking down the dais at someone that is as, green as they come, and their compensation set at $5,000, while myself, in this instance, it would also include the mayor, and Ward 2, we'd be all locked at prior. If you're going to do it, as I've said before, we should just roll it out. Again, the citizens decide. If they vote no in November, so be it. That's how life is, in my opinion, and that's kind of the approach I took with this, where again, the spirit of the charter is the referendum. They're the ones giving us permission. If they don't like the way it's been presented, they can certainly vote it down. Now, one other thing, and I don't want to, I'm good the way it is, but I would just, offer a minor potential, it's not an amendment yet, but to Councilor Gunn's issue previously, when we talked about ensuring that we don't continue to fall behind, which is really what the spirit of Councilor Hatch's initial amendment was, which, like I said, I'm supportive of. Where we got into an issue is we tied it to non-union. We essentially were circumventing charter, in my opinion. We could just add, at the end of that sentence of compensation to be reviewed every 3 years. And that way it has to be addressed by council, yay or nay. We can just say, yeah, we're good with compensation, but that way it's there. It's memorialized that let's not go 10 years without considering this. At least put it front and center for us or future councils. Because really, that's why it's fallen behind, is because it has just been there. Compensation is what it is. I've heard grumblings, like I said, from my first year on council. It was like, well, this compensation is kind of, low for what we actually put in. But nobody likes the concept of giving themselves a pay raise. It is awkward, certainly. And like I said, I was guarded for many years, but about a year ago, I think Councilor Berman, you had brought it up at budget time, and I was sitting there saying, yeah, maybe it is time. It certainly is. So like I said, just does others have comment on that? I mean, it's a simple 2 or 3 word sentence to just add to be reviewed every 3 years or 5 years or whatever. So we ensure that, it's addressed.
Councilor Archer, then Councilor Gunn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. To answer Councilor Johnson's question, I think 5 would be good. 3 is every term.
Yeah, I just tied it with 3 because of that.
But that wasn't where I was going to go is I am completely fine with January 1st, 2025. Our city approved us to be a new council every year. Our way of thinking prior to staggered terms was every council, every 2 years, was a different council. When we went to staggered terms, it effectively, and the voters all voted on, effectively, we are a different council every year. So the councilor may be voting on a pay increase, and I'm putting that in quotes, but the council itself is not, because the body will be different. Whether or not we all got reappointed and all that good stuff, the body itself is reappointed. And we went to staggered terms, 3 years. Every year we're a new council. And that's where I'm confidently saying I approve the way it's written, only because we were staggered. If we were the old council that I remember was part of, where it was a 2-year term for all of us, then I'd be like, oh, we're in our first year, yeah, no go at all. We're still the same council. We are a different council every year, So it gives us a refresh start date every January 1st. So, and the citizens approved it that way. So that was an issue with these 3-year terms, is that we would have this. So I say move forward with the way it's presented. And, well, if Councilor Johnson wants to add the every 5 years review, that's fine with me, but definitely the effective date, I think, is appropriate. And again, to get rid of animosity if a new councilor came on board and was getting significantly higher than the others.
Councilor Gunn?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am more than amendable to Councilor Johnston offering an amendment to that effect. I would suggest going into it. I mean, he suggested 3. Since we are on a 3-year cycle, I suppose, though, to go through all the terms, though, I would say just to keep it neat and clean, either go 3 or go 6 if we think politically you need a little bit more of a cushion between the discussion, because I think 6 might give you the cushion that would allow people, if they are mandated by the charter, to actually have the discussion that, to Councilor Hatch's point, they would, some other future councilors might not have the political will or courage, for lack of a better term, to have the conversation for another 3 decades while we continue to fall very, completely behind inflation. I mean, all things being fair, I had a muffin and a tea today for $10. So let's hope that I think having the discussion every 6 years might be prudent, so we're not falling behind to such a ridiculous point, though, because of the awkwardness of, again, the optics of quote-unquote giving ourselves a pay raise, although it's never seemed to harm the retention rate of your state legislatures or the members of Congress. And all things being fair, I think, when you're knocking on doors, explaining what you do, and showing up to events, showing up to even committees that you're not liaison for, just to see what's going on in city business, I think we more than justify this reasonable bump in compensation. And I haven't mentioned anything on the mayor's salary, but given the amount of just sheer stuff that the mayor has to do, this is long overdue. And I think with the massive turnout that we're going to have this in November for presidential election, I think the voters will be more than fair when they look at those figures that Councilor Hatch has given to us and that I support. And I would look forward to Councilor Johnston adding on an amendment to, again, take the politics out of it and have us, talk about it every couple of years like reasonable adults. Thank you.
Councilor Berman?
I'm fine with council revisiting it every whatever number of years. Just to point out, that does create a logistical challenge for the city. Somebody's got to keep track of whether it's been 5 or 6 years since it was last revisited and make sure to get it back on a council agenda. Just an administrative burden for somebody. So if we are going to do it that way, I might want to make it easy and do even numbered years or every, years that end in 5 or 0 or something like that, just to facilitate it.
Councilor Hatch and Councilor Hewitt.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. I just want to clarify here. I hear a lot of discussion around how we're voting ourselves a raise and we're not. Okay, you've all, I presume, worked for employers, and every once in a while you feel like you're underpaid, and you go to your boss and say, I think I deserve a raise. Now, I don't tell them I'm going to take a raise. I think I deserve a raise, because we are really working for the citizens of Saco. So we're not voting ourselves a raise. We're asking to give us a raise from the very people who we work for. So Councilor Johnson has said this a couple of times. Let's bring it to our bosses. We let them vote and let the chips fall where they may. But I think collectively we've made a very strong argument that these compensation rates are long overdue for an adjustment, and the adjustments that we've brought forward I think are extremely reasonable.
Councilor Hewitt?
I just want to say I agree with what the councilors have said. And seeing the dedication and the time that all my fellow councilors and the mayor put into this is amazing. You see us up here, for our weekly meetings, but there's also committee meetings, there's community events. There's a lot of our counselors that dedicate a lot of time to meeting with the people, and I just want to commend you all for that. And I do agree with this increase because I think it might make it financially feasible to more people. If you had somebody running for school board and they had to hire a babysitter for $20 an hour, which might seem high, but my children were not well behaved, so I could not have afforded to be a school, to join that board. And I just think to look at it that way as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Johnston?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would offer an amendment at the end of the $5,000 to include new language that would say to be reviewed by council every 6 years.
I will second that.
And that is for both sections, council and school board, correct?
Yes.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Any additional discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion on the amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main motion. Any additional discussion? Okay, not seeing any. Roll call vote on the main motion only. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Okay, that now takes us to item 10, and that is the administrative update. City Administrator Bohanko.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I indicated to council earlier last week, the city of Saco has been awarded $20,630 dividend check from the Workers' Compensation Fund by the Maine Municipal Association. The city intends to use this for the city's wellness fund, which will be used to support ongoing educational initiatives, activities, and incentives that encourage our employees to prioritize preventive health and wellness practices. And we appreciate the City Council's support for our Human Resource Department, Safety Committee, and Wellness Committee so we can continue to foster wellness and safety in this culture. The other item I wanted to just again bring to your attention is the infrastructure grant. The City of Saco is pleased to announce that the Maine Department of Transportation has awarded $1,257,000 in funding for infrastructure improvements to enhance to Camp Ellis through the Maine Infrastructure Adaptation Fund. This investment is part of a broader effort to enhance coastal resiliency in response to rising sea levels and the increased frequency of coastal storms. In June of 2024, Saco Public Works, in collaboration with the Planning Department, submitted a grant application for the $1.3 million project aimed at mitigating sea level rise and coastal flooding around the intersection of Ferry Road and Seaside Avenue. And we were awarded $1,257,000, which we will have to match by about $100,000. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the council and thank those employees that were involved in this effort. Also, I'd like to bring to the attention of the council the RFP for engineering services for Saco Island multimodal bridge. The City of Saco will seek proposals from qualified firms for engineering services for a federal aid project consisting of preliminary engineering and right-of-way for the pedestrian bridge across the Saco River. Its scenic falls parallel to the railroad tracks between Saco and Biddeford. The bridge would be an extension to Saco-Biddeford Riverwalk Trail connecting the Saco Transportation Center to the planned Pearl Street Riverfront District in Biddeford and will accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists and possibly support transit shuttle service between Saco and Biddeford. Also, I have the RFP for Housing Action Plan. The Housing Action Plan RFP is now posted on the city's RFP page. Saco seeks proposals from qualified consultants to complete a housing action plan. The goal of the initiative is to create a holistic plan that includes a housing needs assessment, analysis of current policies, and recommends community-informed housing strategies for the city's consideration. Proposals are due September 23rd at 11 a.m. Then I'd like to also bring to your attention the Section 111 Shoreline Erosion Mitigation Project Camp Ellis update. On Wednesday, August 21st, 2024, city staff had an excellent meeting with representatives from the Army Corps of Engineers. We made tremendous progress on areas of responsibilities to help them move the project forward, and I will continue to provide updates on how the project is progressing. At this time, we're very satisfied with the Army Corps of Engineers and their responsiveness to our project. I've also advised our congressionals of this update as well. Upcoming holiday, just a reminder that City Hall will be closed Monday, September 2nd, in observance of Labor Day. And the upcoming agenda preview, of course, we went through a lot of that right now, but we'll have a workshop on growth discussion, workshop on Conservation Commission, joint workshop with the Conservation Subdivision Concept, public hearing on the 166 public spaces and parks, and public hearing, parking plan and fee schedules for 142 Main Street parking. That's all I have, Your Honor, unless there's something the council has for me. I can try to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for City Administrator? Okay, not seeing any. That moves us to item 11, and that is council discussion and comment. Any council members with a discussion or comment? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor McPhail. City Administrator Bohenko, I just want to comment. Your reports, since we first started, you got your feet on the ground, you're moving full speed ahead. These reports are excellent, so I really appreciate the time you take and the volume of information you put in here. And in that regard, I was just curious as to whether or not we could post these reports in some format on our social media. So, because I very often get questions from constituents about these various projects, and your updates are so thorough that it would be a lot easier for me to just point them in that direction, or they stumble across that. So it's just a thought. Sure. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if we have the bandwidth for that. And I don't even know if you need to post exactly what you have, but some sort of synopsis of that I think might be helpful for the,
of course,
community.
Of course, a part of the package, but yes.
Some people just don't.
Yep.
Yeah, you get it on Facebook and it sticks out like a sore thumb. So just a thought.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Councilor Berman?
Yeah, just to remind the public, in case they weren't aware, they are posted regularly on the city administrator's webpage. So you don't find them on the council page anymore, but you can on the city administrator's webpage.
Thank you,
pretty
Councilor.
easily.
Thank you.
Okay, I would actually like to welcome back all of the teachers and administrators in the district today. I was fortunate enough to be invited to Saco Middle School for the first day of teacher workshop. Everybody was in good spirits, and they're excited to start the new school year. So welcome back to all of the teachers. Councilor Johnston.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I always seem to have several things, but I won't bring them up tonight because I recognize that we still have other things to do. But I do want to make note or mention to council and just general public, while I haven't personally saw it with my own two eyes in person, I have seen photographs as Jessica was volunteering her time with the PTO at SMS, that the school district or the superintendent and all those involved, they've made a substantial improvement to SMS, particularly with that cafeteria. And so I think back several years ago when we were going through the school construction process and we were meeting in that room, my first impression as soon as I walked in, and again, obviously, I went to school there and I felt this way as a student, but even more so as an adult, was, wow, this is claustrophobic. It was no light, no windows. We always used to call it the Saco Penitentiary. And it certainly felt industrial and like a prison as a student there. So, going back years later as an adult, I was like, okay, now I understand why. So obviously they've repainted it, but this summer, years ago, the exterior walls had, the that's where the lockers were located, so they couldn't do this. But with the lockers gone, they have punched actual windows into the wall. Just from the photographs I've seen, it's like, wow, it's been so not just eye-opening, but the physical, less claustrophobic feeling. I think it's a remarkable improvement. And again, I thank the school department for, recognizing that it's even just the little things that, make some of those old buildings, more beneficial to learning, and obviously from a teaching perspective, not that I've ever been a teacher, but I certainly just from an adult perspective can see the benefit to being able to see the cafeteria and, ward off against bullying or whatnot. So I think that, like I said, to the public and fellow counselors, if you have an opportunity to go see it, it's a great improvement. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, that takes us to item 12, and is there a motion for executive session?
I'll take that.
Councilor Hatch.
Mayor McPhail, thank you. Be it ordered that the City Council enter into an executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 4056, Personnel Matter.
Motion has been made by Councilor Hatch to enter into executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Councilor Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Enter into executive session at 9:26. We will be downstairs in the conference room. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
Motion made by Counselor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Parks. Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Parks?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Counselor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion to exit executive session at 9:43 passes 7-0. Is there a report?
No report.
Okay, that takes us to item 14, and that is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Counselor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Hewitt. Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Parks?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Hewitt?
Yes.
And Counselor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn passes at 9:43. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.